The pitch-black eternal night has swallowed the world for 3 years. The few remaining lights in the fortress swayed with faint yellow light, reflecting the mottled rust and hideous cracks on the steel walls. The air was filled with a damp musty smell, mixed with the stench of feces and sweat, making people breathless. In the granary deep inside the fortress, the remaining dry bread was divided up by pairs of trembling hands. Each person was given a small piece, which was as hard as a stone. When he bit into it, his gums creaked and whined. What the hell is this? A week's worth of lamp oil, a day's worth of food? A strong man with a beard shook his hand and smashed the crumbs in his hand. His voice echoed in the narrow assembly hall, causing the people around him to roar in agreement. Someone in the crowd cursed in a low voice, "That kid Chen still thinks he is a special soldier. Now monsters hit the wall every day, and we are almost out of gas." The lights flickered, lengthening the shadows of the crowd, and their eyes shone with hunger and despair. Outside the fortress, Yongye's low roar came like a tide, one wave after another, hitting the steel wall and making a dull roar. The cold wind seeping through the cracks in the wall carried the smell of blood, sending chills down one's spine. At this moment, the iron door of the assembly hall opened with a bang, and a tall figure stood against the light. Chen, the leader of the fortress, the iron-blooded aura of the former Special Forces soldier still lingers. His face is as sharp as a knife, his eyes are as sharp as falcons, he is wearing a patchwork battle uniform, and he has a homemade steel blade at his waist. The noise in the hall suddenly stopped, everyone turned to stare at him, and some people subconsciously took a step back. "Patrol team, assemble." Chen's voice was as low as thunder, without any hesitation. "The cracks in the main wall are getting worse and will be reinforced tonight. Lu Ting, lead 10 people to patrol the outside. Luo Li, scout the southeast direction. Qin Feng, check the core of the light. Lin Yuyan, give priority to the wounded." The bearded man stood up with his lips curled and his chest puffed up. "Chen, listen to the roar outside. The monster is getting closer and closer. We only have enough oil for a week, and you still let us go out to die. You said that the fortress can be sustained, but now everyone is hungry, and the lights are extinguished at any time." People around him nodded in agreement, and there was a buzz of dissatisfaction in the air. An old woman held her child in her arms and choked with sobs, "Leader, we listen to you, but the child is almost fainting from hunger." Chen's eyes were like a knife, sweeping over the crowd and stopping on the strong man's face. The hall was dead silent except for the crackling sound of the wick. He stepped forward slowly, each step making the ground tremble slightly, and the strong man's arrogance was involuntarily reduced by half. "Survival comes first." Chen said one word at a time, "If the oil is gone, we will be destroyed. If the wall collapses, we will die. Reinforce tonight, and whoever doesn't go will get out of the fortress and fend for themselves." He turned and pointed to the granary, "I will personally distribute the food. Anyone who dares to snatch it will be killed without mercy." The strong man opened his mouth to retort, but saw that Chen had drawn out the steel blade, and the blade shone coldly under the light. People around him gasped, and some murmured, He really dares to kill people." Lin Yuyan squeezed out from behind the crowd. Her long hair was tied into a ponytail, her medical uniform was stained with blood, and she was holding a medicine box in her hand. With tenacity hidden under her gentle face, she patted a wounded soldier on the shoulder and said, "Hold on, I'm coming." The wounded soldier's severed arm was wrapped in dirty cloth, and the wound gave off a putrid stench. She skillfully opened it and sprinkled the remaining disinfectant powder on it. The wounded soldier gritted his teeth in pain, but said, "Dr. Lin, thank you. Leader Yi is right, we have to hold on." Lin Yuyan raised her head and looked at Chen's back, with a hint of reverence in her eyes. The wounded around whispered, "With Chen here, we still have hope." At the top of the outer wall, Lu Ting led a patrol crawling in the wind. His body was like an iron tower, and the steel spear in his hand reflected the dim light of the light. In the darkness, The sound of the monster's claws scraping against the wall was like fingernails scratching glass, piercing the bones. "Fuck, we're getting closer," a young guard trembled, the torch in his hand shaking so much that sparks flew everywhere. Lu Ting roared, "Shut up." Chen ordered, "Strictly stick to your post." He climbed up the crack himself and used a hammer to smash into the steel bars to fix them, sweat mixed with blood as he slid down. The crack is like the mouth of a giant beast, up to half a meter wide, and the wind howls in, bringing with it the stench of carrion outside. Luo Li shuttled through the darkness outside the wall like a ghost. She was slender, wrapped in black cloth, and carried a detector on her back. The footsteps were silent, avoiding the tentacled monster crawling on the ground. In the distance, the detector suddenly screamed and the red light flashed. She cursed Luo Li and pressed the communicator, Chen. 5 kilometers southeast, a group of monsters are gathering, at least hundreds of them. They are gathering. Inside the fortress, Chen has led the team to the main wall. He took matters into his own hands and welded the steel plates into the cracks, causing sparks to fly and illuminate his resolute profile. Qin Feng followed behind. This talented engineer wore worn-out goggles and carried an energy probe on his thin body. "Leader, the core of the light." Qin Feng's voice trembled and his face was as pale as paper. Chen didn't look back, say. "Energy is exhausted, only 3 days left. The core crystal is cracked. If it is not repaired, the lights will go out and the entire fortress will fall." Qin Feng's voice rose, and the workers around him turned pale when they heard this, and the tools in someone's hands clinked to the ground. 3 days. "We're done." A worker slumped on the ground and muttered to himself. Chen stopped the welding gun and locked eyes with Qin Feng, "Xiu. Whatever you need, I'll grab it." Qin Feng's eyes widened and his throat rolled, "Leader, are you crazy? There are swarms of monsters outside." While everyone was panicking, the detection light on the wall suddenly flashed red. Luo Li's voice boomed from the communicator, "The monster group is approaching at an accelerated pace. A giant leader appears." The alarm bells rang loudly in the fortress, and the piercing sound tore through the night sky. Lu Ting roared from the top of the wall, "Everyone is on alert. The monster is coming." Torches were lit, steel spears stood in rows, and everyone crowded onto the wall, their hearts beating like drums. In the darkness outside, low roars gathered into waves, the ground shook slightly, and a fishy wind blew against your face. Chen jumped to the highest point and looked down into the darkness. His voice penetrated the wind and roared, "Hold on. As long as the lights go out, we will not die." The workers looked at his upright back, and some wiped their tears and whispered, "Leader Yi, he really looks like the legendary god of war." Qin Feng knelt next to the core machine, his fingers flying and repairing, and sweat dripped onto the circuit board, making a sizzling sound. "Hold on. I can do it." Lin Yuyan rushed among the wounded, suturing the wounds, and encouraged softly, "Believe Chen, we will survive." Suddenly, a huge shadow flashed from outside the wall, like a mountain pressing on top. The wind pressure knocked over the torches, and darkness instantly swallowed them up. The guard screamed, "What?" Iron filings flew from the wall, and a huge claw briefly jumped up and hooked onto the steel edge. The monster looked like a deformed giant wolf, with eyes as red as blood and green pus dripping from its sharp teeth. It roared, tearing open the chest of the nearest guard, blood splattered, internal organs spilled onto the wall, and the fishy hot smell filled the air instantly. The guard's screams echoed throughout the castle, "The monster is on the wall." Lu Ting thrust out his steel spear, but it only cut through the monster's scales, and green blood spattered all over his face. His eyes widened and his voice trembled, how is this possible? The wall is 20 meters high, and it jumped up." Chen drew out the steel blade, his eyes as cold as ice, "Kill." But the monster had jumped off the wall and disappeared into the darkness, leaving stumps on the ground. Screams erupted in the fortress, and the crowd was on the verge of collapse. Outside the wall, the low roars came closer. They were coming. On the wall, the heat wave of blood was still billowing in the air, and the putrid smell mixed with green pus penetrated the nose. The torn body of the guard lay limp on the ground, the severed limbs twitching, and the intestines were winding and spilling like slippery snakes, attracting flies to buzz and circle. Screams exploded in the fortress like a tide. Some people ran around holding their heads, while others slumped and murmured, "It's over, the wall can't be defended anymore. Yi Chen's order is to die." The bearded man rushed up the wall from the assembly hall, his face was ashen, pointing at Yi Chen's back and roaring, "Look! The monster is on the wall. You still let us guard it? I told you before, you special forces are now a joke." Lu Ting's steel spear was dripping with green blood. He was breathing heavily, and his iron tower-like body was trembling slightly. He looked into the darkness with wide-open copper bell eyes. "Leader, that thing is too fast. It is not an ordinary monster, its scales are as hard as steel." The surrounding guard torches shook off sparks, reflecting their pale and distorted faces. Someone shouted, "Retreat, retreat into the inner fortress. The outer wall is lost, and everyone will starve to death in the darkness." Yi Chen stood still, the steel blade buzzing in his hand, and the light reflected on the blade drew long blood marks. He took a deep breath of the fishy wind blowing from the cracks in the wall, his eyes as cold as eternal night. While everyone was still buzzing about and whispering desperately like worms, he suddenly shouted, "Lu Ting, follow me." Before he could finish his words, he jumped off the wall like an arrow from a string. When he landed, his knees were slightly bent. The shock caused gravel to scatter, and he rushed towards the direction where the monster disappeared. Lu Ting was stunned, the steel spear almost fell to the ground, and his throat rolled, chasing. "Leader, there are monsters outside." But seeing Yi Chen's figure disappeared into the darkness, he gritted his teeth and cursed, and the body of the iron tower actually climbed over the wall and fell down, making a muffled sound with his heavy footsteps. Everyone on the wall widened their eyes, and some people rubbed their eyes and murmured, "Are they crazy? Just two people chasing a giant wolf?" The bearded man opened his mouth wide, and his voice trembled, "Yi Chen, this kid, really dares to jump?" In the darkness, Yi Chen's senses were as sharp as wild beasts. The rotten soil underfoot was slippery and sticky, and the sour and rotten smell of monster green pus in the air was too strong to dissolve. He heard the deep breathing and the scratching of claws on the ground in front of him. He swung the steel blade and cut off a clump of squirming vines. Green juice splashed all over his arm, burning and stinging. The monster wolf was 30 meters in front, its red eyes flickering like will-o'-the-wisps. It turned back and roared, the sound making the eardrums buzz and hurt, and its fishy saliva sprayed on the ground and corroded it. Roar! The giant wolf pounced, its claws tearing the air like scythes and blowing strong wind against its face. Yi Chen dodged sideways, his claws grazing the battle suit and creating sparks. He stabbed the monster's side with the steel blade in his backhand, and green blood burst out like a fountain, causing the skin to blister. The giant wolf roared in pain and rolled, its tail swept like an iron whip, and smashed a dead tree with a loud cracking sound. Lu Ting caught up and pierced the wolf's eyes with his steel spear, but the scales bounced away. He groaned and backed away, his arms bloody and bloody. "Leader, this beast's skin is too thick." Everyone looked out from the wall to watch, the light and shadow of the fire elongating their horrified faces. A young guard trembled. "Are they fighting in the dark? You can't see clearly, but the roar, the monster is retreating." The bearded man's legs became weak and he murmured, "It can't be, just the two of them." Yi Chen said nothing, grabbed the gap between the giant wolf's rolling, jumped onto its back, and the steel blade went straight to the back of the neck like electricity. The blade penetrated 3 inches into the flesh, and green blood surged wildly. He locked the monster's neck with both hands, and the muscles bulged like steel cables. The giant wolf swung wildly, breaking rocks and sending debris flying. Lu Ting rushed to assist, holding the wolf's claws with his steel spear. Finally, there was a muffled sound, the neck bones shattered, the giant wolf twitched and fell to the ground, its red eyes dimmed, its chest rose and fell gradually, exuding a strong rotten smell of death. Chen gasped and pulled out the blade, green blood dripping down the blade. He crushed the wolf's head with one foot and dug out a fist-sized crystal core. The blue light flashed in the crystal. When he took it, it was warm and pulsating like a heart. Crystal core, energy level. He whispered, stuffed it into his pocket, turned to Lu Ting and said, "Back to the wall." Lu Ting's eyes widened, he stood up with his steel spear on the ground, his voice trembling, "Leader, you killed the leader level with your own hands. This crystal core, the fortress has never seen such a big one." They jumped back to the wall, their green and bloody figures under the torches like gods of war descending. The guards on the wall gasped, and someone knelt down and murmured, "Chen, he killed it. He just used a steel blade." The bearded man's face turned pale, he took a step back, his throat was crawling and he could not speak. There were whispers all around, "It's impossible, the monster jumped over the wall, and he still chased him. We misjudged him." Chen shook off the green blood on the knife, and the fishy smell filled the air. He threw the crystal core to Qin Feng, who came over, "Integrate into the core of the light. Stabilize the energy." Qin Feng caught it with his thin hands, his eyes were as wide as copper bells behind the goggles, and his fingers were trembling. Rubbing the crystal core, this, leader-level crystal core. The energy purity is 10 times that of common ones. But it is unstable and will explode. Chen's eyes were like daggers, "Repair." Qin Feng swallowed, nodded and ran towards the core machine, sweat splashing down. In the light core room, oil lamps flickered, and the air was as muggy as a steamer. Qin Feng disassembled the cracked crystal, and the blue light crystal core was embedded. The circuit board sizzled and sparks flew everywhere. His fingers were flying with welding wires, and veins popped up on his forehead. "Steady, hold on." Suddenly, the lights throughout the fortress flickered, flickering on and off, like a heart twitching. The surrounding workers screamed and retreated. Explosion. "The lights are going out." But in the next moment, the light surged, and the yellow light turned into a dazzling white light, illuminating every crack and every shocked face. The workers rubbed their eyes and backed away, their voices trembling. "It's bright, 3 times brighter than before. Engineer Qin, you can do it." Qin Feng slumped down, his goggles shattered, and gasped, "The crystal core is unstable and will only last a week, but it's enough for us to breathe." When the news spread, the residents in the assembly hall widened their eyes, and someone whispered, "Chen's crystal core saved the light. We thought it was over." While the lights were stable, Chen ordered an inventory of the material warehouse. Inside the warehouse, the smell of mold and rot was overwhelming, and the shelves were empty except for a few bags of moldy dry food and half a bucket of cement. The old man in charge of taking inventory reported in a trembling voice, "The food is only for 3 days. There is no spare lamp oil for a week." The crowd was furious, and the bearded man jumped out again, 3 days. "Chen, how can you say it's fair? The strong take more, let's just starve to death." Several hungry people agreed, pushing and shoving, and one person grabbed the bread bag, and the sound of tearing was heard. Chen strode in, his steel boots stepping on the ground like thunder, each step making his heart skip a beat. He glanced over and locked onto the bearded man, "Kill the robber." After saying this, the steel blade was unsheathed, and with a flash of cold light, the arm of the hungry man who was snatching food was broken at the elbow, blood sprayed on the bread bag, and the screams echoed. There was dead silence in the hall, except for the smell of blood and the twitching sound of a severed arm. The bearded man's face turned pale, and he knelt down and trembled, "Leader, spare your life. We were wrong." Everyone backed up, their eyes widened, and someone murmured, "He is really killing, with such an iron fist, who dares to make trouble again?" Lin Yuyan was running around in the medical area. The wounded were lying on the ground. The rotten flesh was curled up on the broken arm, and the stench of pus and blood filled the sky. She opened the guard's claw wound and found green thread spreading through the veins, infection, signs of mutation. The guard groaned and twisted, and she decisively injected him with only the remaining antibiotics. At the same time, she dragged him into the isolation cabin and locked the iron door with a bang. The wounded around them turned pale and whispered, "Dr. Lin, will he turn into a monster?" Lin Yuyan wiped away sweat, her gentle face firm, "Isolate, burn if it changes. Leader Ye's order, survival is priority." The wounded nodded, awe flashed in their eyes, "With her and Yi Chen, we can hold on." Luo Li, Yi Chen turned around, "Go out to scout the ruins, search for cans and batteries. Come back in 3 hours." Luo Li appeared from the shadows, wrapped in black cloth, her slender figure nodded, "Yes." She climbed over the wall and disappeared into the darkness, her footsteps silent like a ghost. Lu Ting reorganized the patrol team, hitting the scrap metal with a hammer, splashing cement slurry on the cracks, and choking dust flying up his nose. He welded the key nodes himself, dripping with sweat and blood, "Reinforce it. If the monster jumps again, the wall will not be broken." The guards followed, and the sound of hammers sounded like war drums, resounding through the night sky. A young guard gasped, "Captain, Yi Chen killed the giant wolf, you saw it, we really have hope." Lu Ting growled, "Shut up and work. The leader is here, we have an iron wall." 3 hours later, Luo Li returned, her backpack bulging and her body covered in mud and blood. She gasped and threw down more than a dozen rusty cans and 2 sets of batteries. The sound of the collision was loud and clear, "The food is enough to last 5 days, and the batteries can replenish the lamp oil." Everyone rushed to distribute them, and the sound of hungry chewing was heard. The smell of rust from the cans mixed with the smell of meat made people cry. But Luo Li looked solemn and pressed the detector, "In the ruins, abnormal energy fluctuations. Like ancient ruins, blue light pulsed, attracting a small group of monsters. I avoided it, but, it was calling." Qin Feng came over after hearing this, eyes widened, "Energy waves. Similar to crystal nuclei, crisis." Yi Chen nodded and looked at Yongyi, "Surveillance." As the residents shared the canned food, they whispered in admiration. Luo Li brought back life-saving supplies, Yi Chen stabilized the situation with an iron fist. "We survived." The bearded man swallowed the meat and murmured, "He is not a joke, he is a savior." The wall trembled violently like a giant beast panting, and every impact erupted with a scream of twisted metal. Dust poured from the cracks like a waterfall, choking the guards and coughing repeatedly, and tears and snot mixed with fear flowed across the walls. Outside the southeast wall, hundreds of deformed corpses surged like a black tide. Rotten pieces of flesh peeled off from the skeleton, making a wet and muffled sound when they hit the ground. Red eyes flashed like blood stars in the eternal night, and claws scratched the steel plate, causing sparks and harsh friction. The leading beast was more than 3 meters tall, with a swollen belly that dragged the ground, its intestines everted and squirming like a living snake, and the fishy and rotten smell rushed in like a tsunami, drilling straight into the nose and burning the lungs. "It's over. Hundreds of them, this is the wave of fortress destruction." A thin guard on the wall dropped his torch, his legs were weak and he knelt down, his voice was like crying, "Where is Yi Chen? His crystal core is useless to save the light, the wall is about to collapse, and we will all become corpses." Several people nearby agreed, pushing and fleeing, and someone screamed, "The inner fort is sealed. Door! Don't let the monsters in." The bearded man's face turned sallow, and he backed away with his head in his hands. "I told you before that the energy fluctuation was Yi Chen's fault. It was caused by Luo Li's reconnaissance, and now it's all over." Despair spread like a virus, the morale of the patrol collapsed, the hammers clanked on the ground, and the torches swayed to lengthen their twisted shadows. It was late at night, the lights were bright but flickering, and the crystal core pulsated like a heartbeat that was fast and slow. Suddenly, the scout from the southeast screamed, and Luo Li shouted, "The wave spreads." Outside the wall, the ground trembled violently, and the low roar formed a tsunami. A small wave of corpses came in, hundreds of deformed corpses, rotten flesh dripping down, and claws hitting the steel wall with a loud roar. The wall shook, dust fell, and the guards screamed, "Tide of corpses. It's caused by energy." Lu Ting roared, "Alert!" In the darkness, red eyes approached like a sea of stars, the impact sounded like thunder, and the fortress was shaking. Chen's figure rushed up the wall from the assembly hall like a ghost. The wolf blood remained on the steel blade and had not yet dried up, and the green smell lingered. He locked his eyes on the giant beast, took a deep breath of rotten wind, and his chest rose and fell like a bellows. "Lu Ting, fight melee on the front line. Kill the leader." After saying that, he jumped off the wall, smashed his feet on the ground and splashed rubble, heading towards the tide of corpses. Lu Ting was stunned, the steel spear almost fell out of his hand, and his throat rolled. "Leader, just the two of us, charging hundreds of heads." But seeing Chen submerged in the black tide, he gritted his teeth and roared, climbed the iron tower over the wall, and followed the figure with heavy footsteps hitting the ground like thunder. In the darkness, the tide of corpses was like a living hell, with the slippery sound of trampling carrion, the roar of claws waving, and the roar of the beast tide, and the air was as sticky as blood. Chen's steel blade danced, cutting off the first wave of corpse arms, and the severed limbs sprayed green blood all over the battle suit, burning like acid corrosion. He side-dodged the giant beast and pounced, his claws hitting the ground making deep pits, and the shock wave sent numbness to the soles of his feet. Lu Ting caught up and pierced the chest of a corpse with a steel spear, but was bounced away by the swollen flesh. He groaned and backed away, with 3 new blood grooves on his arms. "Leader, the skin of this giant corpse is as thick as iron, and the spear cannot penetrate it." Lu Ting's iron tower body was pressed against the wall, and a steel spear penetrated the claws of a probing corpse. Green pus spat out and burned his arms, making them smoke. He roared, "Stand still. Whoever retreats will die." But there was a tremor in his voice. The guards around him stared wide-eyed and murmured, "Captain, there are too many of them. The giant corpse in the lead has claws like sickles, and the wall cannot hold it." Everyone on the wall gasped, and a young guard rubbed his eyes and screamed, "Crazy. Chen rushes into the corpse wave. That is a way to die." The bearded man's knees weakened and murmured, He really dares. We can't even see clearly with hundreds of red eyes." The giant beast roared, the sound was like thunder, and its intestines swung and swept forward, bringing with it a storm of rotten juice. Chen dwarfed and rolled to the ground, his intestinal juices spilled and burned through the ground. He jumped up and jumped on the back of the giant beast. The steel blade went straight to the back of the neck, and the green blood exploded and burned his arms. The giant beast swung wildly, knocking several corpses away, and there was a crisp sound of bones cracking. Lu Ting pounced, holding his steel spear and claws. "Hold on." Finally, the cervical vertebrae shattered and exploded. The giant beast fell to the ground, crushing more than 10 corpses. The rotten odor was like a volcanic eruption, and a gap opened in a sea of red eyes. "Qin Feng." Chen shouted with his blade drawn, his voice piercing through the corpses. "Overclocking lights, burn them." In the core room, Qin Feng's thin figure had rushed to the console, his goggles were broken and sweat was like rain, and his fingers were dancing wildly on the lever. "Overclocking? The crystal core is unstable and will explode." But there was a roar outside the wall. He gritted his teeth and pulled the lever to the end. The circuit exploded, and the lights of the fortress suddenly flashed. The white light surged, like the sun descending into the eternal night, and the dazzling beam swept through the tide of corpses. The carrion was instantly blackened and blistered, and the smoke and stench shot straight into the sky. Dozens of corpses melted into pools of pus, blindly retreating with red eyes, screaming and piercing. The guards on the wall looked forward, and the light and shadow of the torch reflected their wide eyes. Someone trembled, I saw it. Chen killed the leading giant corpse. The tide of corpses is chaotic. The bearded man's face turned pale, and his teeth chattered, impossible. Just steel blades and spears, killing hundreds of them. Is he a human? The workers rubbed their eyes in the core room and backed away. One person screamed, burn. A pile of charred corpses. Qin Feng sat down and gasped, the energy has been drained, only 3 days left, but the corpse tide has retreated by half. The wall cheered and exploded, Engineer Qin, magical skills. The lights are like a fire dragon. Luo Li jumped out from the side wall, her figure in black cloth disappeared without a trace. She quickly jumped on the back of the corpse and threw a homemade Molotov cocktail, the glass shattered, the kerosene exploded, the orange flames swallowed the corpses, the gap opened, black smoke billowed, and the aroma of burnt meat mixed with the rotten smell filled the nostrils. She rolled to the ground, daggers cut throats of several corpses, and blood splashed all over the black cloth, the gap opened, causing them to kill each other. The guard saw this from the wall, widened his eyes and whispered, Luo Li, the ghostly murderer, half burned. The tide of the battle reversed, with waves of corpses clashing and biting each other, rivers of green blood flowing, and the ground slipping like oil. Lu Ting's steel spear danced wildly, smashing the corpse into pieces and splattering his brains. He laughed, leader, the wall is stable. Chen nodded, and the steel blade harvested the corpse. The big crystal core fist had dug out more than 10, and the blue light pulsed and warmed his hands. In the rear medical area, Lin Yuyan knelt down to sew up the wound. The needle and thread threaded through the rotten flesh, making a wet and tugging sound. Plasma sprayed into her white robe. She decisively injected the anti-infective agent. The needle pierced the vein. When the medicine was pushed in, the wounded twitched and screamed, Dr. Lin, it hurts to death, but he is alive. She wiped the sweat with a gentle look in her eyes, hold on, Leader Yi is ahead to kill the tide. The wounded nodded, with admiration in his eyes, with her, we are not afraid of infection. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out from the corner of the inner wall. A panicked resident grabbed an old-fashioned rifle and fired randomly at the wall. The bullets grazed Lu Ting's shoulder, and blood exploded. He groaned and rolled, who? The resident's face was twisted, and the muzzle of the gun was still smoking, there are too many monsters, I'm afraid of death. Shoot to clear the way. The crowd exploded, and some people agreed and pushed, yes, retreat to the inner fort, whoever stands in the way will die. The ugliness of human nature is like a zombie wave erupting, with more gun grabbers, knives flashing in the chaos, and guards cutting each other bloody. Hearing the sound, Chen jumped back into the wall, stepped on the barrel of the rioter's gun with his steel boots, and with a flash of cold light, the head of the resident who fired the gun rolled down, a fountain of blood spread 3 meters away, and his brains splashed to the ground. There was deathly silence in the hall, leaving only the smell of blood and rust and the twitching corpses. The rioters stepped back with eyes wide open. Some people knelt down and wet their pants, their voices trembling, Chen, he killed me. The burly man with a beard's throat squirmed and murmured, executed on the spot, ruthless, who dares to mess up again? Everyone gasped, fear turned to awe in their eyes, the leader is intimidating, the fortress is ironclad. The tide of corpses collapsed under the strong light, fire bottles, and 2 heroes' killings. The corpses dragged back into the darkness, growling and getting further away. The ground was left full of charred corpses, rivers of pus, and severed limbs. 20% of the wall was damaged, the steel plates were bent and dented, and dust was still falling, but the patrol team had poured cement on the welds and the hammering started again. 30 crystal nuclei were captured, and the blue light flashed and piled up into a hill, pulsating like a living thing. The morale soared like a lantern. Residents gathered around, eyes shining. Someone whispered, Chen commanded, Lu Ting fought hand to hand, Qin Feng burned the tide, Luo Li exploded, Dr. Lin saved. We won. Lu Ting's shoulder wound was wrapped with cloth, and he leaned on the steel spear and laughed, Leader Sleeves, the crystal core is enough to build the wall. Luo Li gasped and wiped the blood, the source of the energy is in the ruins, we need to find it. Lin Yuyan finished bandaging, her gentle face was wet with sweat, there are only 10 casualties, and the infection is isolated. Qin Feng held the crystal core to inspect it, and his eyes narrowed under the goggles. Yi Chen stood on top of the wall, the steel blade buzzing on the ground. He glanced at the crowd and announced in a cold voice, reconstruction has begun. The crystal core melts the lights and strengthens the main wall. Tomorrow we will send a team to the ruins to destroy the energy source. Anyone who disobeys the order will be killed. As soon as he finished speaking, the residents shouted, follow the order. The bearded man knelt down, his voice trembling, the leader is wise, we will follow him to the death. The assembly hall was boiling, eyes of admiration were like torches, and hope was rekindled in the ashes of despair. The lights in the core room suddenly flashed like a heart spasm, and the blue and white light beam stretched Qin Feng's thin figure. He staggered out of the threshold, his eyes were bloodshot under the goggles, and his voice was like broken glass scraping his throat, Leader. Isolation cabins number 3, 4, and 7. Have mutated. Green thread sprang out from the crystal core, the skin blistered, and the claws scratching the door were like iron hooks scraping bones. Before he finished speaking, a muffled sound came from the distant bulkhead, bang. Boom. Like a giant hammer hitting the heart, green pus seeped out from the cracks in the door, and the sour and rotten smell filled the corridor like poisonous mist. It made the patrolmen cough and bend over, and tears mixed with mucus flowed from their noses. The interior of the fortress exploded like a gunpowder keg. Residents climbed up from their sleeping bags. The flickering torches reflected their distorted faces. Someone screamed, virus. The crystal core is the source of the poison. Everything we touch is destroyed. A fat resident held his head and backed away, knocking over the bucket. The clear water splashed on the ground and smelled of mud. His voice trembled. Yi Chen's trophy killed people. I told you not to melt the lights, but now they are all half corpses. The women and children nearby were crying, pushing and grabbing only the bread. The crumbs were flying and mixed with dust. Someone shouted, give it to me. The child is hungry. Human nature surged like mud, the knife was unsheathed and flashed coldly, and a bloody premonition hit his nostrils. After hearing the news, Lin Yuyan rushed out of the medical area. The blood on her white robe was still wet. She rushed towards the window of the isolation cabin. 3 figures twisted and struggled behind the glass, the skin of the original wounded was cracked and green veins were covered with vines. His lips were turned out and his fangs were exposed. His red eyes stared at her with squinting eyes. His claws hit the door and dented his fingerprints, making a clicking sound like broken bones. Her face turned pale, and the scalpel trembled, the infection is accelerating, turned into a half-animal, listen. The heart beats like a drum, and the body temperature burns through the iron sheet. The roar in the cabin changed, the mixed-race flesh tore with a greasy sound, green bubbles burst into spray, and the rotten stench penetrated the nose and burned the lungs. It was late at night, and the lights in the core room were steady. Qin Feng sat alone and dismantled a small crystal core, and the blue light illuminated his pale face. Suddenly, green thread squirmed in the crystal core, like a living insect emerging. He trembled with his fingers and dropped the table, virus, unknown mutant strain. In the isolation cabin in the distance, the locked-up wounded roared in a different tone, green bubbles bulged on the skin, claws scratched the metal of the door, and red eyes flashed, the mutation had begun. Qin Feng rushed out, his voice trembling, leader. The crystal core contains poison, and those infected will explode. The lights of the fortress flashed suddenly, and a deeper roar could be heard faintly in the eternal night. Yi Chen jumped off the wall, his steel boots hitting the ground with rubble flying, and the green blood of his battle suit dried and scabbed. He locked his eyes on the cabin door, took a deep breath in the rotten mist, and his chest was like iron. Lu Ting, the ammunition is on. Isolated execution. After saying that, he threw himself on the cabin door, the steel blade picked the lock and broke the iron, and the door panel bounced open, the three-headed half-beast jumped out. The first head's forelegs were swollen like an elephant's legs, and the claws clawed and tore the air while whistling. The second head's spine stood up like a forest of knives, green juice dripped and sizzled on the ground. The third head's mouth was split at the base of its ears, its fangs clicked together, and its red eyes locked onto Chen and breathed out hot and spicy breath. Lu Ting's shoulder wound was bleeding. He held the steel spear against the subway tower to block the crowd. He shouted, "Back off. Whoever gets closer to the hatch will die first." But the fat residents behind him pushed him forward, their eyes red. "Is there a crystal core in it? It would be a shame to burn it, but give it to me." The light of the knife flashed and cut through it. Blood beads rolled down his arm flesh. Lu Ting groaned and turned around, pointing the tip of the spear at his throat. "Get out." Everyone backed up, their eyes widened and they murmured, "Captain, murderous as a wolf." Despair was like a black tide, the lights flickered and lengthened the shadows. Some people knelt down to wet their pants, yellow liquid dripping down their legs and pungent to their noses. Chen ducked and flashed his first claw, and the wind from the hook swept over the side of his neck, and the steel blade of his backhand sank into the half-beast's shoulder. The green blood exploded and burned his arms like soreness. He roared, drew the blade and spun around, and the second spine swept out. He jumped up and stepped on his back to gain strength. The tip of the blade pierced his eye socket, and his brain sputtered with green turbidity. The third one bit him, and he rolled to the side, his claws denting the ground and making his soles numb. Lu Ting opens fire. Bang! The iron core bullet penetrated the swollen leg, shattered the bones and sprayed flesh. The half-animal howled like a pig being slaughtered, and green bubbles exploded all over the body. The second shot hit his chest, his ribs collapsed and stuck to the ground, and his flesh and blood were mangled and the stench rose to the sky. Everyone inside the wall widened their eyes, and a woman hugged her child and trembled. "Look." Captain Lu's shot destroyed his leg, Chen's blade was like lightning, and the three-head suppressed it. "It's amazing." The residents of Fat Dun chattered with their teeth, and murmured, "Ammunition is precious. One shot can kill half an animal, and we thought it was over." Lin Yuyen picked it up, the knife came forward to assist, the needle was inserted into the vein of the beast, and the medicine was pushed in. The convulsion continued, and her eyes showed awe. "The leader controls the field, Dr. Lin stops the bleeding." The last claw of the beast scratched Lu Ting's breastplate, sparks flew, he roared and the third bullet hit his head exploded and green rain poured down, and the corpse hit the ground with a wet sound. The crowd screamed and exploded. The fat resident's face was sallow and his legs were weak and he knelt down. "Monster." Transformed from a human, Chen struck 3 times with 3 heads. Lin Yuyen dropped her scalpel to the ground, her voice trembling, "Leader, they are extremely powerful and their claws can tear steel." Qin Feng rubbed his eyes behind his goggles and whispered, "The virus strain is more powerful than the tide of corpses." Lu Ting handed over the rare ammunition magazine for the steel spear, there were only 20 iron core bullets left, and loaded the gun with a clang. His throat rolled, "Leader, I cover." Dead silence fell, leaving only green blood, steaming acid mist and bullet casings rolling down and clanging. Chen drew his blade and shook off the blood, crushing his fangs with his steel boots, and looked at everyone coldly. "Disinfect. Sweep the entire fort. Reduce the ration by half, and prioritize water purification. The crystal core is temporarily sealed." The residents gasped, and the fat man knelt down, his voice trembling, "Yes. The leader's iron rule, stop the virus." Their adoring eyes lit up like torches, and the women and children whispered, "He saved the fortress, he spared no expense in ammo and executed his own mutations." Lu Ting unloaded the magazine. With only 17 rounds left, he growled, "It's worth it. The wall is clean." In Qin Feng's core room, he held the crystal core pile with trembling hands, blue light pulsating on his face. He turned on the circuit and used the welding gun to melt the wire, upgrade the lights. Integrate 30, expand the range by 30%, but it is unstable, and the remaining green wire will pulse. The sparks flashed, the lamppost skyrocketed, and the white light pierced the eternal night, illuminating the 100-meter-long river of charred corpses and pus in the periphery. The scorched stench faded, and the new light was as warm as dawn. He slumped down on the monitoring platform, and the pointer jumped wildly. "Hold on, 3 days become 5 days, but the monitoring is still there." The workers gathered around and rubbed their eyes, whispering, "Qin Gong's magical skills." The darkness retreated, and the fortress was like a lighthouse. One person trembled, energy pulses, like a heartbeat, alive. Lin Yuyen was in front of the laboratory table in the medical area, disassembling the green silk sample under the lamp, extracting the syringe and boiling it, sweat dripping. She murmured to herself, "Simple detoxification, alcohol neutralizes green acid, but there is a shortage of gauze and antibiotics." The remaining medicine bottle was empty, and the smell of medicine in the air was mixed with rancidity. She bit lips. "I can't hold on, I need to destroy the hospital." The wounded man murmured in the cabin next to him, his skin was slightly green. She decisively injected the reagent, and the twitching stopped. The wounded man gasped, "Dr. Lin is alive, the pain is like fire." The assistant next to him stared wide-eyed, "God's hand. Pull him back from the mutation." Lu Ting was at the welding station on the wall. The hammer hit the steel plate, and sparks were like rain. He embedded the crystal core into the crack, and the blue light penetrated into the metal. The metal hummed. The bent plate was as straight as new, and the claw marks bounced off with twice the hardness. His arm was bruised and bloody, sweat mixed with green stains dripping and sizzling, and the ammunition magazine next to the steel spear shone coldly. "The wall is as strong as a mountain, monsters come to smash the claws." The patrolman glared in agreement, and the hammers sounded in unison, "Captain, melt core, Cabelco. 20% damaged and 70% repaired." Dust fell, the smell of cement was strong, and the wall stopped breathing. Luo Li wrapped her body in black cloth and slipped out of the side door. The eternal night swallowed her figure. She lay low on the ruined street, her footsteps silently stepped on the charred corpses and the brittle bones clicked, and the putrid wind blew against her face like a knife. The outline of the ruined hospital looms, with green veins pulsating on the broken walls and creeping vines, and red eyes peeking out and growling. She unsheathed her dagger and sneaked into the hall. The shards of glass stung her feet, the dust from the medicine cabinet stung her nose, and her claws scratched the tiles in the distance. Suddenly, a black shadow pounces. There was a swarm of deformed rats, their fangs flashed in the moonlight. She rolled and threw a Molotov cocktail, the orange flames exploded and the smell of burning hair exploded, the rats hissed violently and hit the wall, exploding into a blood mist. In the inner shadows, rumors crawl like poisonous snakes. A bearded man whispered in the corridor, "The traitor is hiding. The crystal core virus is poisoned by an insider and leads to a wave of corpses." The crowd's whispers exploded, and someone pointed a finger, "That fat guy, grabbed the supplies already." Chen inspected with steel boots, pressed the knife to his throat and asked, making the fat guy tremble in his diaper, "Unjustly accused. There is no evidence." The investigation yielded no results. Several people were forced to confess with slight injuries in the flash of knives, and the smell of blood was rolling. He said coldly, "Kill without a warrant, all under surveillance." Everyone was silent, with fear in their eyes and turned to respect. Leader Lei Lei, traitor Wu Zong. Deep in the medicine warehouse, the chase of monsters intensified. A swollen rat king, high-knee claw hook swept the rack, medicine bottles shattered and jingled. She jumped on top of the cabinet and cut her throat with a dagger. Green blood fountain burned her legs. She gritted her teeth to pick up the antibiotic box, and tied her waist with gauze. The rats surrounded her and squeaked, their claws were like a sickle. She smashed the window and jumped out, her feet pricked with blood from the broken glass. The Rat King roared after her and the ground shook. She ran away in the alley, her chest rising and falling like fire. When she returned to the castle, the night sky was thicker and the black cloth was speckled with blood. At the entrance of the fortress, the guard's torch illuminated her figure, and he screamed with wide eyes, "Scout Luo is back. Full of medicines, legs are bleeding." She dropped the package, the antibiotic bottle rolled down crisply, the gauze spread out and became white and dazzling. Lin Yuyan rushed to unpack it, with tears in her eyes. "That's enough. The antidote will keep you alive." Luo Li gasped and wiped his sweat. The hospital Rat King chased him for 100 meters and burned half of the nest. Everyone gathered around, and the fat and strong man screamed, "Ghost! We dare not go near the monster's lair to retrieve the treasure." Chen nodded and said coldly, "Credit for credit. Rest." The light steadily expanded at night, with white light like a dome covering the fortress. The warm light drove away the rotting fog. The residents gathered around the fire and whispered, "The crisis is over." Yi Ling disinfected, the army executed, Qin Gong expanded the light, Dr. Lin detoxified, and Luo Li took medicine. Morale soared like a lamp, and someone knelt down and knelt, Fortress Iron Guard. The pointer of Qin Feng's monitoring station was steady, and he whispered, "The energy is stable for 5 days." Lu Ting patrolled the wall, and Kabelko flashed blue light. Luo Li held the yellowed map fragment between her fingers. The firelight stretched the bloodstains on her pale face. The green stains on the edge of the paper were like poison ivy. The ancient text veins faintly pulsated with blue light, breathing like a living creature. She murmured in a low voice, "The ruins, the source of energy, but the marks are too clear, and monsters will move when they hear the wind." The whispers of the surrounding residents exploded, and someone pushed forward. A fat and strong man with red eyes, a heavy breath and a white medicine bag smelled way, "Baby Scout. Show us. What if it's fake, a waste of supplies on the expedition, and the whole castle will starve to death?" The women and children hugged each other and cried, their hungry and thin faces were reflected in the swaying torches, the crumbs were still stuck to the corners of their lips, and the air was sour and hungry. Yi Chen's steel boots crushed a fragment of a fong on the ground, and the crunching sound made everyone tremble. He locked his eyes on the fragment, reached out to take it, and rubbed the veins of blue light with his fingertips, his core beating as cold as crystal. The fat man came closer to breathe, his voice trembling and stinging, "Leader, is this scrap of paper worth ammunition? The crystal core virus has just stopped, the new zombies have flashed red eyes, go out and die. Our ration has been halved, and the children are chewing tree bark." The crowd roared in agreement, and some people knelt down. The ground hugged his legs, "No. The fortress has been lit for 5 days, the wall is 30% complete, and 17 bullets were fired. The expedition team fainted from hunger halfway, and the monsters gnawed their bones. Despair filled the air like black mist, and the lampposts pulsed and buzzed unsteadily, reflecting their distorted shadows, and the smell of urine was pungent and pungent. Lin Yuyan wiped the sweat on the sleeves of her white robe, and held the remaining medicine in her hand with the syringe. She took a step forward, her voice trembling and gentle but urgent, "Yi Ling, the map is very risky, the team members can't hold it anymore, the vitamins are only enough for 3 days, the sequelae of infection will occur, and the green veins will rekindle." Qin Feng probed the door of the core room, and there were bloodshot eyes behind his goggles. He rubbed the circuit board with his thin hands, "The energy pulse is unstable, the green silk of the crystal core remains, and the furnace needs 0 repairs. Send a team to retrieve it. If it is exposed, the lights will go out and everyone will die." Lu Ting leaned on the ground with his steel spear, and the iron tower body blocked Fatty's push. The blood scab on his shoulder was cracked and dripping. He shouted, "Leader, the patrol is already red." Eyes swarming against the wall sporadically, claws scratching Kobelko and sparks flying everywhere. I can't hold on alone. Everyone's eyes widened, their throats rolled, and the fat and strong man murmured, "It's amazing. Even the Iron Guard is in despair, we are finished." Chen inhaled the rotten mist deeply, his chest beating like a bellows. He raised the fragment, and the blue light surged and pierced the eternal night for a moment, reflecting the outline of the ruins outside the castle, and ancient words emerged like a star map, "Energy ruins, eternal light." He said with a cold voice like a hammer, "False. This blue vein has the same origin as the crystal core. It contains technology and is 10 times more stable when melting lights. Supplies are tight. Cut the ration in half to last for 7 days. The expedition team is limited to 4 people. Luo Li will carry 5 rounds of ammunition, 2 bottles of water, 1 box of vitamins, and 3 Molotov cocktails. Qin Feng repairs the furnace, Lu Ting patrols the wall, and Lin Doctor prepares medicine. Traitors are monitored throughout the fort, and any offenders will be punished. After saying this, he swung his blade and roared in the air. The chubby man with a sallow face knelt down on his knees. "Yes, yes. Leader Iron Jew, the blue light is alive, we are blind." Lin Yuyen's eyes burst into tears, and the scalpel trembled. "Leader, trust me, take the maximum dose of vitamins to support your strength." Qin Feng's throat moved and he rubbed his eyes. "God's fault. I will assemble the parts from the molten crystal core." Lu Ting struck out with his steel spear, and sparks flew out. "Fight me, and the monster will smash the claws." In the core room, Qin Feng threw himself on the workbench, the welding gun sizzling the pile of molten crystal cores. The blue light flashed like a heart spasm, and the green wire residue burned the air. He clamped the iron wire with his thin fingers and inserted it into the main energy furnace. The furnace wall buzzed red and hot, and the lamp post surged by 30%. The white light was like a sharp sword piercing the night, illuminating the 200-meter pile of corpses in the Pooh River outside. The burning smell faded, and new warmth seeped into the castle. The workers gathered around and stared. One person rubbed his face and murmured, "Qin Gong." The brightness exploded. The pulse was like a dragon's veins, and the darkness retreated 100 meters. "We thought the lights were out." Qin Feng sat down, the pointer jumped wildly and stabilized. He whispered, "The prototype is complete, the new device, test the light point." The small light bulb flashed a soft blue and white light, no pulse and no green wire. The workers trembled. "Artifact. Infinite energy. The fortress is reborn." On the top of the wall, Lu Ting's hammer hit, sparks rained down. He thrust out the patrol steel spear, and the night wind sent a low roar. Sporadic mutant wolves rushed towards him, red-eye protruding squinting claw hooks swept Kobelko and sparks flew everywhere, teeth clicked on the hammer handle, and the green blood fountain burned his arms like soreness. He roared and spun around, the tip of the spear sank into the wolf's neck, making a greasy sound of broken bones and flesh. The parts of his claws were recovered and clinked on the ground. 5. 2 crystal cores, no trace of Kobelko. The patrolman stepped back and stared, his voice trembling. "The captain slaughtered the wolves alone, the claws flicked away like hitting an iron mountain. We saved ammunition." He shook the blood, the steel boots clicked on the corpses, the red eyes flashed more in the distance, and the tsunami roar loomed. In the medical area, Lin Yuyen pushed the needle into the arm of the reserve member of the expedition team. The vitamin liquid penetrated clearly, and the scent of medicine mixed with the smell of sweat in the air. The blood spots on her white robe were not dry, and she said warmly, "Hold on. Increase your physical strength by 30%, and your green veins will last for half a month." The team member bit. Teeth, muscles beating like iron, Dr. Lin's hand, painful as fire but alive. Luo Li wrapped her body in black cloth, her legs were covered with gauze to stop the bleeding. She sharpened her dagger and looked at Chen for a game. "Leader, I will lead 3 of the 4 elites, the ruins are full of rats. You have to go around 100 meters to avoid it, and if you guard the entrance, sacrifice is inevitable." Chen's eyes were like a blade pressing on her shoulder. enter the ruins, the signal will be sent back. One person's death is worth the energy. Luo Li's throat rolled, and her eyes showed determination. Believe. The black cloth is silent, Ghost Road. Lin Yuyan stepped forward to tie the vitamin belt, her eyes wet. Sister Luo, come back, the medicine is waiting for you. The new bond was like an iron chain welded tightly. The three of them looked at each other, and the crowd whispered, Iron Team. The leader is a god, and there is no gap for traitors. The expedition team set off, the steel plates of the fortress gate opened and closed creaking, and the eternal night swallowed up the figure. Luo Li led the way and lowered himself down the ruined street. The brittle bones of the charred corpses clicked silently under his footsteps, and the black cloth melted into shadows. She whispered, left around the rat's nest, red eyes smell the blood. The strong man number 2 on the team carried a water bottle and panted heavily. Vitamins burned his body, hungry, but strong as an ox. Deep in the ruins, the green vines climbing on the broken buildings pulsed, roaring and collecting the tide. Luo Li pointed her dagger at the right alley, avoid. The nest is smelly. They crawled in the mud, their trousers soaked in rotting water, and it was biting and cold. Their breaths were broken, and their rear claws scratched the tiles as they approached. Number 3 of the first team member wiped his sweat and muttered, Luo scolded the Ghost Road, let's wander in and feed the corpses. Thin soldier number 4 held the magazine with trembling hands, 5 rounds are precious, monster nests are like the sea. The blue light of the map guides the way, the ancient tower looms at the end of the ruins, the cracks at the entrance have a faint blue light, and the electric stench in the air is as strong as thunder. But the guardian beast appears. The mutated guardian beast was as swollen as a rhinoceros, with bayonets erected on its spine. Its red eyes were locked and it breathed out hot and spicy breath. Its claws hit pits on the ground and made the soles of its feet numb. It roared like thunder, rolling gravel, and jingling sounds. Luo Li roared, disperse. Molotov cocktail. The orange flames were thrown and exploded, causing the burning odor and the animal skin to burst and green mist sprayed out. But it pounced and swiped the number 2 brawny man with its first claw. His gun went bang. The iron core bullet penetrated the leg bone and shattered into spray. The strong man howled and pushed the bullet, leg is useless, give the kettle to Luo. The beast's tail swept off his spine, and the bloody flesh smashed to the ground with a wet sound. The body twitched and was covered with green veins. The team members opened their eyes wide and screamed inwardly, Number 2. Sacrifice. I thought they were all wiped out. Luo Li rolled her dagger and cut her throat. The green blood burned her legs like fire. She gritted her teeth and said, come in. 3 people are enough. The thin soldier's number 3 cover bomb was fired twice, and green rain poured down on his eyes. Inside the fortress, the lights on the dome were warm and steady, and the residents gathered around the fire and whispered to boost their morale, adventure iron blood, the sacrifice is worth it. Qin Feng's test lamp prototype was blue and white, and the workers knelt and knelt, Qin God. No green, no veins, melt the whole core to destroy the eternal night. Lu Ting turned around and turned around. After collecting the parts, the blood of the spear was still wet, erotically destroyed, the wolf core is stored in the warehouse. Lin Yuyan removed the gauze to prepare for the injury, and the syringe was empty, vitamin support, wait for it. Suddenly, the torch of the entrance guard shook, and the red light of the signal flare ran through the night sky, whoosh. Exploding the blue rune, relics are in. Light technology, ancient furnace is pulsating. But the alarm is triggered. Red eyes are surging, the location is exposed. Quick help. Everyone gasped, and the fat man's face turned pale and his legs were weak, exposed. The new corpse tide is tsunami, the fort is like a lighthouse to attract wolves. Chen unsheathed his blade and stared coldly at the night sky. The red eyes were like stars, the roar of the sea was approaching, and the pulse of the lamp was buzzing and his heartbeat was speeding up. The red light in the night sky exploded like tears of blood, and the blue runes of the signal flares twisted into ghostly spells in the eternal night. The embers of the brazier in the fortress popped, reflecting the distorted faces of the residents. Some people's throats rolled, and the smell of urine instantly mixed. Entering the putrid air, the fat man's legs went weak, and his knees made a crunching sound as he hit the ground. Sweat oozed out like pus on his sallow face, exposed. Red-eye tsunami, fortress like a lighthouse to lure wolves into the house, our lights are only 30% bright, 30% of the wall, 14 rounds of bullets, and the child is still chewing tree bark. The crowd roared and pushed, someone grabbed a shovel and pointed tremblingly at the wall, listen. The claws are like rain, the red eyes have climbed up, the crystal core and green veins have rekindled, all the castle becomes beast food. The lampposts buzzed unsteadily, pulsing like a heart spasm, illuminating the red eyes of the river of pus in the periphery surging like a sea of stars, the roar of the tsunami rolling in, the fishy wind and green mist blowing against the base of the walls, and the pungent smell of rotten flesh and bones was like a needle pricking the lungs. Chen's steel blade was unsheathed, and the cold light roared across the sky. His eyes were like iron hooks locked into the night, his chest was beating and he inhaled the rotting mist, his voice was as cold as the frost blade hitting his heart in an eternal night, panic. Kill them all before the lights go out. Qin Feng, activate the new device, use full power to fuse the forwards. Lu Ting, climb on the wall to fight in hand-to-hand combat, return collect the crystal core. Dr. Lin, prepare gauze in the medical area, use the maximum amount of antibiotics, and the injured will go to the wall to replenish blood. All residents in the fort are equipped with shovels and spears, and the traitors will be under double surveillance, and those who violate it will be chopped off. After saying this, he stepped on the steel boots, and the ground cracked, and everyone gasped. Lin Yuyan's white robe trembled, and the scalpel when it fell to the ground, she picked it up with wet eyes, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind, leader, iron order, brave. Vitamins are given for 3 days and half a month, gauze and soju are disinfected, I support the wounded soldier. Bloodshot bursts behind Qin Feng's goggles, he grabbed the blue and white prototype lamp with his thin hands, and murmured in his throat, it's done, full power, divine destruction. The fat and strong man climbed up, his eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. Yi Ling was so calculating that the traitors were still suppressed in the crisis. We were so blind that we thought we were all dead when the lights were turned off. The morale was like flames, but the roar outside the wall was deafening, and the claw hook hit Kabelko, sparks splashed and tinkled like rain. Deep in the ruins, the ancient pagoda's blue light pulsed like a beating heart, Luo Li's dagger dripped with green blood, and the gauze on her legs cracked as hot as fire. She lay low on the edge of the crack, breathing heavily and smelling the smell of electricity and beasts. The number 3 thin soldier's magazine was empty, with only one iron core left. His face was pale and his legs were limp against the wall. Luo Chui, the alarm has been triggered. Red eyes are coming from all sides, the wind in the lair is like a tsunami, the entrance is blocked, the 3 of us feed corpse. Number 4 pried open the ancient furnace, and the blueprint fragments floated out. The big blue ball of the core energy crystal fist emerged. The veins were like the breath of the galaxy. The electric arc jumped and burned the air, but the guardian beast came back. 3 swollen spiny rhinoceroses rushed in, their red eyes bulged and breathed out. The claw hook smashed into the pit and the rocks rolled down and smashed the leg bones. Number 3 screamed and pushed, the last shot. Bang! The iron heart penetrated one eye and the brain exploded with green rain, splashing Luo Li's black cloth with a scorching smell, but the 2 heads and tail swept the number 4 ridge, and the blood and flesh were blurred and wet. He twitched with green veins and murmured, crystal. The crystal is worth it to Luo. Luo Li had a stick in her throat, and her eyes were bloodshot. She rolled over and grabbed the crystal and stuffed it into her arms. The dagger cut the second end of her throat, and the green blood fountain burned her arms like sour. She roaring, break out. Burn the blueprint, cover number 3. The thin soldier's steel teeth bit off the bullet casing, and the orange flames of the Molotov cocktail exploded and blocked the road with burning smell. However, a pack of red-eyed wolves surged out of the cracks, their claws and teeth clicked to eat the corpses. The three of them rushed out covered in blood. Luo Li's ghost scurried forward, the black cloth melted, and the charred corpses were silent under their feet. The rear roared like thunder, and the green mist hit their noses and choked their lungs. Number 3 broke off his back and stabbed the wolf's neck bone with a spear. Blood spurted from his throat. He fell to the ground and stared. Luo, run. The team's energy value is halved. Luo Li lay, a hybrid, danced her dagger wildly to kill the 5 wolves, and the crystal blue light pierced Yongyi. She whispered, iron-blooded, return to the castle. At the top of the fortress wall, the monster striker hit like a rain of hammers, sparks splashed from Kobelco dents, pus and blood coated the wall greasy and smelly, Lu Ting's iron tower body blocked the gap, steel spears were thrust out in a whirlwind, and the wolf's head exploded into the green mist fountain. His shoulder was injured and blood dripped, and he roared, come on. 50 red-eyed heads, 30% of the walls will be cracked. The patrolman stepped back and his eyes widened, and the shovel trembled and dropped to the ground. Captain's hammer, 1 spear and 5 wolves, we can escape, but our claws are like the sea. Suddenly, the door of Qin Feng's core room burst open, he rushed up to the dome with the blue and white prototype, and the welding gun melted the crystal core pile. The blue light surged like a dragon's veins and rushed into the main lamppost. The buzzing was as loud as thunder. The workers gathered on their knees and shouted, Qin Gong. The prototype melts the whole furnace. No green and pulseless, the brightness explodes 10 times, and the magic skill will destroy the eternal night. The lights are all on. The white light explodes like the sun, piercing 300 meters of the eternal night. The strong light is like a downpour of acid. The front monster's red eyes bulge and explode. The skin and flesh are bubbling and melting, and the green mist is steaming. The scorching smell is burning in the nostrils and the air is burning in the eyes. The wolves howl and retreat, claws scratch the ground, and the pile of corpses melts into a bubbling river of pus. The residents beside the brazier stared wide-eyed, and a woman and child held their heads and screamed in joy, the genie of lanterns has descended. The sea of melted corpses, we thought the wall collapsed and all was destroyed. The fat and strong man rubbed his eyes and murmured, God Qin, the castle is like daylight, and the monsters retreat blindly. Yi Chen climbed up the wall, the steel blade roared in the air, he jumped into the wolves, the blade was like lightning, slashed the wolf's neck and green blood spurted out in an arc, the corpse clicked under his feet, Lu Ting's steel spears struck together, the iron tower blocked the elite beast king, the swollen bear beast with red eyes like lights, and a forest of bayonets stood up on its spine. The claw hook hit Yi Chen's steel boots and sparks exploded. The beast king swiped Lu Ting's arm with his tail, his flesh and blood torn apart, and he growled with a green rain that stung his eye sockets and brains, leaders attack, unparalleled divine blades. The patrolman's eyes widened, his voice trembling, the Yiling Marine Corps slaughtered the beast king, the claws bounced off like an iron mountain, but our shovels are still shaking. The monster forward melted and ebbed, but the Chinese army roared to the sky, red eyes covered the top of the slope, and the wall cracked in the aftermath of the impact, and 30% of the Kobelco was in jeopardy. Luo Li was sitting alone unpacking the medicine package, gauze was tied around her legs to stop the bleeding, when suddenly a box of antibiotics contained shreds of paper, fragments of a yellowed map, with ancient text veins like a star map, pointing to the depths of the ruins in the distance, and the word ruins appeared in blue light. Her fingers trembled, and her pale face lit up, ancient, source of energy. But there is a risk of exposing the mark. In the distance, low roars gathered into a tsunami in the eternal night, new trends were approaching faintly, and the red eyes at the edge of the lights flickered more. The steel plate of the castle door creaked open and closed, and Luo Li's figure stumbled in. The black cloth was torn and stained with blood, and the blue light of the crystal in her arms was pulsating. Her legs were bloody and she knelt down, vomiting green blood and coughing, get, crystal. Blueprint burning, ancient furnace technology, melting lamps for eternity, the team has been halved, number 3 and number 4 feed the beasts. Everyone gasped. Lin Yuyan threw herself into the gauze to wrap her legs, wet with tears. Sister Luo is iron-blooded, God. Charming back. The best medicine. Chen grasped the crystal, rubbed the cold blue veins with his fingertips, and threw it to Qin Feng, melt. Permanent lamp. Qin Feng inserted the prototype with trembling hands, the welding gun sizzled, the blue and white sky exploded and melted the entire system, the lamppost exploded like a star, the white light expanded 500 meters, the night receded like a tide, the monster tsunami howled blindly and collapsed, the stench of the melted corpse faded, and a new warmth seeped into the fortress. The workers knelt and kowtowed at their throats. Qin Luo Shenhe. Eternal, we thought we were all dead and reborn. The fat and strong man kowtowed with weak legs. The leaf collar is broken, the crystal blue river is, the fortress light is eternal. The traitor is invisible, we swear allegiance to the death. The joy of victory exploded, residents cheered around the fire, the popping of the brazier reflected smiling faces, some people shared bread crumbs with sticky corners on their lips, food was stable for 7 days, lamp oil was worry-free, bullets were saved and 5 crystal cores were recovered. However, the energy of the crystal fluctuates faintly, and the blue veins run through the night sky like a signal, exposing the entire picture of the fort. The ruins of the ancient tower are reflected in blue light, and the dark shadows of the evernight clouds in the distance are even larger. Luo Li gasped and whispered, "Police," the fluctuations leaked, the red eyes retreated but a natural disaster caused. Suddenly, a shadow in the dark corner flashed, and someone eavesdropped and slipped away. The fat and strong man rubbed his eyes without noticing, and the crowd shouted, "Iron Castle is reborn." Chen glanced at the dark place like a blade and snorted coldly. In the medical area, the blood spots on Lin Yuyan's white robe expanded. The needle pushed antibiotics into the injured soldier's arm, and the clear vitamin solution seeped into the muscles. Her warm voice was urgent, "Hold on. Press the green pulse, stop the bleeding on the wall." The wounded man gritted his teeth and stood up, holding the shovel tightly. Dr. Lin's magic hand, the bitterness is like fire and activates blood circulation. Wounded soldiers came to the wall to fill their positions one after another, and their morale was as bright as a lamp. The eternal night clouds are pouring down like ink, slowly pressing down on the dome of the fortress. The edge of the 500-meter white light begins to twist. The blue veins are pulsing faintly like a heart twitching. The low roar in the distance is rolling like thunder. The red-eyed mountains are squirming at the bottom of the clouds. The faint shadows of wings are fluttering and fanning the fishy wind. The rotten premonition has been smelled into the nose and lungs. The patrolman's shovel fell from his hand and fell to the ground. His waxy face twisted and his throat rolled, and urine flowed down his trousers. The smell of concrete flowed out. Yun has suppressed the lamp. The red eyes are not going away, and the winged beasts are coming back. The castle is like a fish tank waiting to be boiled. We turn on the lamp and cause natural disasters. The wall is cracked in 3 parts, and 7 bullets are fired for 3 rounds. The crowd roared as the brazier exploded, and some people scratched their heads. Fa knelt down and murmured, "The crystal leaked." Luo scolded the blueprint for his life, but sold the entire castle. The traitor was not caught in the shadow, and the inner ghost gnawed at the heart. The fat and strong man rubbed his eyes, his voice trembling like ashes in the wind. The magic lamp of the leaf collar lasts for eternity, the clouds cover it like the prelude to eternal destruction, the food becomes 3 in 7 days, the medicine smells bad after 3 days of burning wine, the children gnawed on the bark of the tree and cried out for hunger, all died. Chen stepped on the wall with his steel boots and the cracks expanded. His eyes pierced the clouds with iron hooks, and he breathed in the rotten mist in his chest without blinking. The steel blade buzzed as it was unsheathed and the cold light cut through the sky. His voice hit his heart like a frost blade. Cloud pressure. Reinforce the main wall 3 times. Luo Li's blueprint is burned, and the steel is melted and strong. The chemical layer, Qin Feng divided the crystal tower lights, suppressed the fluctuations. Lu Ting, the recruits are trained in melee combat, the food is rotated, and the food is eaten by the beast. Dr. Lin, if the infection is not reported, the green vein hider is tortured. After saying this, he threw out the blueprint fragments and welded them. The gunfire licked the steel plate, and everyone gasped. Lin Yuyan's white robe trembled, and the scalpel fell to the ground with a clang. She picked it up with wet eyes and whispered, "The leader is broken, the god calculates the blueprint. I will sweep the whole area, disinfect with soju and suppress the green. The fat and strong man's legs are weak." Standing up, eyes widened, Yishan ordered the clouds. The wall was 3 times as strong as the river. We thought the lights were out and we were starving, blind dogs. But the clouds were approaching like a giant beast opening its mouth, the shadows of its wings were fluttering and dense, the edge of the light was dim and buzzing, and it was as oppressive as the head of an iron barrel. In Qin Feng's core room, bloodshot threads burst behind his goggles. He grasped the blue crystal ball in his thin hand and pulsed coldly. The welding gun merged into the tower light circuit and the arc jumped into the spicy air. The workers gathered around and knelt and shouted, "Qin Deng Shen, split the crystal pressure wave, stop the leakage. The clouds are completely dark, and our welding gun is shaking like a leaf." He roared and pushed the prototype to full power, blue and white. The towers buzzed, but ink in the clouds penetrated the lampposts, and the light shrank by 200 meters. The embers of the indoor brazier reflected the wax face and twisted. Someone murmured, "Optimize the magical skills, but the clouds and beasts are overwhelming, and the energy can last for midnight." The semi-darkness in the castle was a sign. Residents pushed and roared beside the brazier, and the food scraps were rotated with shovels to monitor. The smell of hunger mixed with sweat and soreness. Green blood oozed from the gauze on Luo Li's leg injury. She tore the black cloth and wrapped it with a dagger. The ghost rushed out of the castle gate. Her feet stepped on the pus river and the brittle corpse made no sound. She breathed out and smelled the fishy heat at the bottom of the cloud. Her wings fluttered like rain hitting the slope, and her red eyes squinted with mist. She leaned against the crack on the top of the slope, her reconnaissance mirror shattered into bloodshot eyes and locked in the clouds. Flying beast, with a wingspan of 10 meters, red eyes clustered, claws like sickles, thousands of heads in the nest cloud, crushing the fort like locusts. Whispering into the communicator clicked static electricity. She rolled to avoid the hot wind and burned her arms, the green mist choked her lungs and coughed up blood, lead. Confirmed the natural disaster, the winged beast is trying to claw the wall foundation, fast. The communication in the castle buzzed, and the patrolman heard the shovel falling to the ground and stared. Luo Goishan scolded, "Yunzangihai, our shovel has 3 claws." But she broke through, her leg bones cracked and trailed blood marks, and she coughed green in the black cloth, "The iron blood, is worth it." The flesh of Lu Ting's iron tower body, shoulders and arms was torn and wrapped in gauze. His steel spear pierced the recruits in a whirlwind. The air roared, and the soil of the training ground was splashed with stinky sweat. Iron core bullets were limited to 1 magazine for rotation. 7 green cores were recycled. The iron cabinet clicked, metal combat. The bullets save animal cores, and the food wheel is 2 taels a day. Hungry, go into battle, violate the limit and chop. The recruit's legs were soft and he knelt in the mud, his head was rolling and his urine was mixed with dirt, and someone's waxy face was trembling. "Captain's hammer, shoulder injury is dripping with blood, we are still training, our claws are broken by flicking, and the wheel of food is like a dog." He roared and smashed the pit with his spear, and the recruits climbed up and gritted their teeth and grabbed the shovel. "Iron law, divine power, support the sea of wings." But the cloud shadow pressed his head, and the training roar drowned out the pre-sound of the wings, suppressing it like a rope strangling the neck. In the medical area, the blood spots on Lin Yuyan's white robe expanded, and the syringe pushed the soju into her arms to simmer and scald the meat. She scanned the area and smelled the faint odor of green veins. The wounded soldiers hummed unreportedly, and there were people with curled-up legs and green veins crawling like worms, and their throats rolled with sweat and pus. Dr. Lin, little green, hunger pressure has not been reported. She flashed the cold light of the scalpel and stroked the green blood fountain on her arm. Her voice was warm and ferocious. Infection. No report of treason. Kidnapped, tortured, all antibiotics with green veins. The wounded soldier's eyes widened and his throat trembled. The magic hand is broken with iron, the wine is hot, we thought Xiao Lu was harmless, the inner ghost is ugly. She dragged out the 3 green veins and locked the wall with iron chains, and whispered with tears, the leader is suspected of treason, sweep all, the top officials. Suddenly, shadows flashed in the dark corners of the core room, and a thin monkey figure of an engineer grabbed the crystal fragments and pulsated with blue light, his footsteps as light as a mouse sliding through the crack of the door. Qin Feng's welding gun roared and he turned his head, eyes exploding behind his goggles, stealing crystals. Traitor! He threw his skinny legs at the lock and clicked, workers knelt around and shouted, smashing their shovels on the ground, Qin Shenyan, engineering ghost steal energy, we weld dog eyes. The news exploded, Yi Chen's steel boots cracked on the ground and rushed in, the iron door of the black cell opened, and the cold light reflected his steel blade against his throat. With a waxy face, the engineer's legs were weak and his urine was mixed with the smell of mixed blood, and his throat was rolling, hungry. The crystals are sold for food, and the aliens promise. Yi Chen's eyes were like hooks piercing the soul, and he snorted coldly and pressed the shallow cuts of green blood, promise. My accomplices chop. The fat and strong man stared outside the prison and his legs trembled, the leaves are judged by the gods, and the blades are like frost. We thought the crystals were stable, but the inner ghosts are chewing the castle. The clouds are finally over. The ink swallowed up the lamppost, the white light suddenly shrunk 50 meters, the fortress was half dark like a tomb, the brazier puffed and embers reflected the grimace, the winged beast pounded in the thick rain and hit the base of the wall, claws and hooks jingled and sparks flew, the dents of Cabelco expanded and cracked, and pus and blood were smeared greasy and pungent. The monster's probing front spray seeped into the cracks in the wall with its red eyes. Residents screamed and pushed. Someone grabbed a child and held his head. The smell of urine filled the air, the lights are half out. The wings and claws are like sickles, half of the wall is cracked. Let's tackle it and eat it all. Z roared, come on. The recruit's shovel is limited in ammunition. The recruit's legs were soft and the shovel cracked, and his throat murmured, the captain is blocking, Yi-Hai is testing, we are hungry and can't hold on. Lin Yuyen's gauze in the hospital area was interrupted and the medicine was pushed out, and the green-veined man howled and the chains clicked, and his lungs were choked by the smell of infection. Qin Feng carried the prototype into the dome, the welding gun melted the blueprint of the cloud disruptor, and the arc sizzled and jumped in the air. He leaned down on the ground and the line clicked, and the workers knelt down to protect their throats. Qin Lantern Divine Cultivator, the cloud interference is extinguished. Half-dark starvation. The wing claws smashed against the jingling rain, sparks splashed on his eyes and shattered bloodshot threads, but he roared and pushed the crystal's entire veins, the buzzing was like thunder, and the lamppost surged. The white light pierced the edge of the clouds and expanded for 300 meters. The red eyes of the winged beast bulged and exploded, and the green mist melted into the sky. The tide receded and its claws scraped the ground. The burnt smell faded away and was irritating to the eyes and lungs. The residents rubbed their eyes by the brazier and gasped, the lights are back on. Qin Shen broke the clouds, we thought the darkness was all gone. But the engineer laughed sharply in the prison and confessed, accomplices, high-level officials. The fat director, Su Liang sells crystal pictures, the outside Ghost Alliance, the inside Ghost Changes leader. Yi Chen whirled the steel blade and sprayed the wall with arcs of green blood. He glanced at the dark corner and snorted coldly. The fat man with a pale face knelt down on his knees, Director. The traitor in the top management. We swear to be loyal to the blind eye, the heart of the castle is broken, the natural disaster is suppressing, and the rebellion is surging. Looking from the distance from the wall, the eternal night clouds are rolling like giant beasts, roaring looming, neither wolves nor bears, red eyes like dense mountains, lights all bright like lighthouses, crises brewing like black tides. The clouds receded, the shadowy winged sea roared looming, the wall was 50% cracked, the food rotation was faint, the hunger roar was faint, the green vein torture stench filled the air, the blueprint reinforcement welding gun was not finished, the oppression in the castle was like a rope tightening, the eternal night roared in the distance, neither wings nor bears, like a mountain waking up. Lu Ting's iron tower body and shoulders were covered with blood, and the steel spears whizzed in the air. His waxy face was livid and his throat was roaring, "Get the iron order. Nest attack." The recruits knelt in the dirt and sweat was splashed, their eyes were round and their legs were soft, the team's magic hammer. The inner ghost broke the foundation, we flicked 7 wings, and the nest was like a tiger's mouth. If you delay the betrayal and spread the rumors about foreign ghosts, the lights will go out 300 meters away. Gritting his teeth, he said in a low voice, the patrol locked the area, Qin Feng guarded the lamp, Dr. Lin suppressed the green, Luo Li rebuked the foreigners, move. Everyone gasped, and the fat man climbed up with trembling legs outside the prison, his eyeballs almost fell out. Yishan broke the nest, the 3 ghosts betrayed the fort, we thought the high-level people were iron-hearted, but the blind dog rebelled. Suppressed like a rope strangling the neck, Yuan Yi roared and rolled, and the clouds were thicker and thicker with ink. Deep in the dark cell, the dank and stinky smell is like a rotting corpse. 3 ghosts, skinny monkeys, are curled up in iron chains. Their waxy faces are oozing with sweat. They whisper with the sound of claws and shovels grinding against the wall foundation, fat confession. Quickly break through the 3-meter crack, and the winged beast burrows in to gnaw on the child. Crystal sells food and will always be full. Suddenly the iron door burst open, Yi Chen's steel blade pierced the sky with a buzzing sound, and Lu Ting's steel spear stabbed his throat. The first ghost's green blood fountain splashed against the wall with a disgusting stench. His heart sank, brothers have spent 3 years together to shovel a wave of corpses, and sell the castle like a dog. The blade pressed against the throat of the second ghost, his eyes were iron-eyed, Water Ghost Alliance. The pictures are all for sale. The ghost's legs were soft and his urine was dripping with mixed blood. He laughed sharply, the king of wings, I wish, the castle will be changed. We dare not enter the hole, we are shaking with iron and blood. But in Yi Chen's mind, a child was chewing bark and crying, and he shouted decisively, complaint from the leader. Burn the evidence for external contact. The 3 ghosts dragged out the iron chain and dragged the mud, the Baoguang brazier was popping and their faces were twisted, and the residents were pushing and shouting, and the smell filled the air. The edge of the square was half dark for 300 meters, and the 4 ghosts of the fat director were tied to the pillars with iron chains. Yi Chen's steel blade was raised high and pierced the clouds with cold light. His voice was like a frost blade falling to the ground, betray the plot and break the foundation, and the winged sea drills into the castle to gnaw blood. Iron law, chop off the head to warn others. The first head of the blade fell and rolled into the mud. Green blood sprayed in an arc and splashed into the brazier, simmering and steaming. The fat director screamed, hungry boy, 3 months of food. Hurry. The second blade spun, and the head trembled and fell to the ground. The resident's brazier exploded, and someone with a waxy face scratched his head and knelt down and murmured, God cuts off the iron blood, we are hungry and oppressive, how can the devil survive? But the third ghost's legs were soft and wet, and his eyes were narrowed and whispered, the Wing King, will come in person, and the mountain will wake up in 3 days, and the castle map will be given away, and it will be swallowed forever. Yi Chen's heart was shocked like thunder, and his mind was racing, Wing King. The giant roar of neither wing nor bear came to destroy the fortress in person. Delay the final decision, or risk your life. The blade pressed down on Fat's throat and shallowly sliced green blood droplets, and he snorted coldly, "Give it all. Burn the picture in the ghost's lair." The fat head rolled down and the blood pooled into the muddy river with a stench. The square was dead silent, and the shovel dropped to the ground with a crisp sound. Human conflict breaks out. The thin woman in the back row hugged her child and pushed her waxy face forward, her throat rolling with tears mixed with sweat. The leaf collar is broken, the ghost sells the picture because of hunger, the child gnaws the bark of the tree and they die together, please show mercy. More than a dozen residents knelt in the mud and roared, someone grabbed the soil and smashed the iron chain and clicked, the iron blood is too cruel, the castle is like a prison, hunger suppresses all ghosts. Chen's steel blade buzzed and sheathed, the iron lock on his chest sucked up the blood mist, and his heart was like a knife, the castle's heart is rotten. Hungry ghosts, kill all the people. Are you worried? His eyes were wide and cold, the Iron Maid is the best, the rebellion is alive, the King of Wings is here to destroy them all. Lin Yuyen rushed out with blood stains on her white robe, the scalpel jingled, and the needle in the medicine box pushed extra soju and antibiotics into the skinny woman's arms to sizzle and scald the meat. She said with tears in her warm voice, "God's judgment saves the fort. All the green vein pressure medicine is pushed away, I will give you extra vitamins, iron-blooded life." The thin woman's throat twitched and her eyes and legs softened. Lin Shen's hand, "The spicy medicine invigorates the blood, we are blind with hunger, and Yi Ling is iron-hearted to protect the family." The residents roared and gasped, kneeling beside the brazier, "Dr. Lin requiems the soul, God warns ghosts, and vows to eradicate Yi." The support is stable, the oppression in the square is relieved, the green blood odor is gone, and the firelight reflects the iron face. Qin Feng's eyes were covered with bloodshot eyes in the core room. He grabbed the detector with his thin hands and scanned the secondary lighthouse line. The electric arc jumped in the spicy air, and his waxy face suddenly twisted and throated, "Defection." The sub-tower's transistor cracked, and the energy was leaked for a week. Can the lamp last 300 meters for 5 days? The workers knelt around and trembled with the welding torch. Qin Dangshen, ghost pay energy, we thought steady, blind welding dog. He roared and carried the prototype into the tower. The blue and white pulsations of the welding gun surged and the pressure was released. The buzz in the room was as loud as thunder, optimized twice. Stable in a week. The lampposts in the castle pierced the clouds for 350 meters. The residents rubbed their eyes and shouted, "Qinshan repairs, the magic skills crush us, we are hungry and think it will be dark forever." Luo Li's injured leg was wrapped in green blood and wrapped in black cloth. She rushed to the castle gate like a ghost, stepping on the pus river and making no sound. Her breath was cut off and she could smell the fishy heat of the wings under the clouds. The reconnaissance mirror shattered and locked in the crack on the top of the slope. Her wings fluttered like rain and hit the far slope with claw hooks jingling. She rolled to avoid the fog, her lungs choked with green blood, and the dagger scratched her wings and belly with green blood. She dragged back the steel iron box and the fuel barrel, which was slick with blood. She dragged the mud back to the door with blood stains on her shoulders, 2 tons of steel, fuel to support the lamp for a week, pick up the remains beside the wing nest. The patrol dropped the shovel and rounded his legs. Luo Guishan rebuked, "Seriously injured Tu Bao, we dare not come out, iron-blooded replacement." In the castle, they pushed and knelt beside the brazier. Luo Shen replenishes, supplies can survive. Yi Chen's steel boots were cracked into half-dents when he stepped on the wall, and the game in his mind was like sharpening. The King of Wings came in person in 3 days, the wall was in jeopardy and the energy source was food for 5 days a week, and the blueprint of the force field ruins melted. The flames of the welding torch licked Kabelko and sparks flew out. He swung the steel to melt the wall foundation. The force field of the ancient blueprint furnace pulsated and buzzed. The 3-thickness layer of the steel plate expanded and clicked. The blue light caulking the relic chip pierced the air. The force field is on. Wing claw bullets. The workers knelt around and sweated. Zhu, Chen is welding by himself, and the blueprint is melted by God. We thought the wall was dead when we welded, and the divine force field is like a river of iron. The wall is 60% stable, and the inventory of materials is heartbreaking. Energy is stable for 1 week, food is distributed every 5 days, medicines are exhausted in 3 days, 7 green cores are locked in the cabinet, and 7 bullets are limited to recycling. The clouds suddenly thickened and the ink swallowed the edges, the winged beast swooped down in the dense rain and fanned the fishy wind and burned the face, the red eye spray penetrated the seams, the claw hook clanged and hit the force field, buzzing and sparks flew everywhere. Lu Ting blocked the top of the iron tower, and the steel spear pierced the air with a whistling whirlwind. The first wing exploded with green mist, steaming and stinking, and the second claw snapped and rolled into mud. His shoulder was bleeding and he roared, "Come on. Recruit shovel stab." The recruit's legs were weak and he gritted his teeth and the shovel broke with a crisp sound. He roared with his throat, "The team's divine hammer is down, the divine spear is like thunder, we are hungry and shaking." 3 heads. Lu Ting jumped up and stabbed the belly of the third wing with green blood spraying out. The pit at the base of the wall collapsed. The wing sea roared and the claws scraped the ground. The blue light of the force field pulsated to stabilize the wall. The residents rubbed their eyes at the brazier and roared, "Lucian fell, the wall force field projectile beast, the divine team's iron tower protects the family, we swear to eradicate the night forever." Chen's steel blade is still dripping with arcs of green blood. The fat director's waxy face is twisted and he is kneeling on his knees. The smell of urine mixed with mud in his pants is pungent. His throat is rattling and rolling, and his eyes are squinting like dead fish and turning white. Lead, hungry pressure, Jing sells the alien for 3 months of food for the child, the alien promises to retreat, the 3 brothers, the dark base breaks the wall. Home, but the inner ghost is gnawing at the heart and selling it, and the trust is shattered like a wall. His eyes are piercing the fat face, and the green blood of Luo Li's leg is flashing in his mind. When the fort is destroyed and there is no home, iron and blood will survive. A huge roar in the depths of the mountains is like a heart bursting in the eternal night, the ground veins are shaking, the earth is rolling, hot mist is flying into the sky, the cloud ink is tearing a blood-red tear, the endless winged beast is roaring like a black tide, fanning the wind and burning bones, the giant shadow behind is slowly emerging, neither a wing nor a bear, the king of eternal night. The body is covered in pitch-black carapace stacked like a mountain, with protruding red eyes that spray out poisonous mist that corrodes the air and stings the lungs. The 4 claws are as thick and long as iron hooks. With each step, green blood springs out of the pit 3 meters deep. The roar shakes the fortress and the lampposts buzz and shake for 350 meters. The halo is distorted. The wax faces of the residents beside the brazier instantly turned pale, and some people knelt in the mud with their throats rolled and their legs weak, screaming, the king surrenders. No beast but a god, we welding iron are shaken to death." The recruits' shovels fell to the ground with a crisp sound, their eyes were bulging and they were wet with sweat. God breaks the heart of iron, the sea of wings is endless, 60% of the wall cannot hold up, the king's claws are gnawing blood. Despair is like a rope strangling the neck, the hunger roar turns to crying, the child gnaws the bark of the tree, grabs the soil with his thin hands and smashes his chest. Chen's steel boots stepped on the wall and cracked the roof, the iron lock on his chest sucked the blood mist, and the plum weight in his heart cracked the wild waves of the game. 3 days in person, it will explode tonight. The energy is optimized for 1 week, the wall force field has claws, but the king's army is endlessly colliding. Gritting his teeth and roaring, the steel blade buzzed and cut through the air, all police. Lu Ting stepped forward, Luo Li exploded from the side, Qin Feng locked the lights, and Dr. Lin crushed him. The iron-blooded shovel king. The words fell, and the dense rain in the high sea hit the force field with jingles and sparks flying. The first wave of claw hooks tore through, blue light pulsed and clicked, the dents in the wall base expanded, green blood leaked, rancid and spicy nose, and the side wall was cracked 5 meters in 3 places. The collapse of mud and rocks rolled with thunder, and the recruits took 3 steps back with their throats shaking and their eyes widened. I have received the order from the gods, the king's army is smashed, we can't hold on with 7 bullets, and the children's blood feeds the beasts. The brazier in the castle burst into flames, half of it was destroyed. Lu Ting's iron tower body and shoulders burst into blood, and the veil exploded. His steel spear pierced the air and howled in a whirlwind. The first guard's winged bear hybrid behemoth's claw hook hit the top of the pit and shook the ears. The spear tip stabbed the carapace, and the green mist fountain splashed on his face in pain. He roared with iron-green throat, "Team's hammer. The new recruits will shovel stabs." The second guard's belly exploded with a green blood rain. The recruit's legs were as weak as corpse soup. The recruit's legs were weak, his teeth were broken, his claws were crunching, and his throat was stinging with blood. He was grunting. The king's guard fell from the Lushan tower. We trembled to death from hunger, and the divine spear struck the sky with lightning. But the king's roar rolled against the wall, and the 10 guards fluttered and fanned. Lu Ting's arm flesh was torn and green blood flowed along the spear. He was unyielding in his heart. The leader marched forward to cut off the guard and cut off the army. Luo Li's leg was injured, green blood seeped out of the black cloth. She ghostly ran to the top of the flank slope, the reconnaissance mirror shattered the lock monster's back road, and the black tide surged, the claw hook clanged, the breath was cut off and smelled the fishy and hot wings mixed with corpses, the dagger scratched the wing belly, the green blood surged, and the fuel barrel was oily and clicked. The iron box was ignited and exploded with thunderous bang. The road behind the road cracked, tongues of fire licked the sky, swallowed up hundreds of wings, and rained down on the ground. The recruits looked at the distance and knelt in the mud with their knees rolled softly. Luo Guishan exploded. The road was seriously injured and we didn't dare to turn aside. The king's army was stuck. Luo Li. The rolling claw hook wiped the green mist on his shoulder, choking his lungs and coughing up blood. He shouldered the second bucket of mud and dragged it back to the foundation of the wall with a crisp sound. 3 explosions. The back road is closed. The patrol's shovel fell out of his eyes. The gods rebuke the blood, we are loyal to the shovel king. The 5 shadows of the skinny monkeys of the remnants of the traitor party took advantage of the chaos and cracked the side wall. The shovel grinded and whispered, claws and ammunition were hidden. Forever full. Suddenly the cold light of the steel blade buzzed across the sky, and Chen jumped out of the suit covered in blood and burst into green blood spots. The blade pressed down on the first ghost's throat and cut into arcs of green blood. Jian laughed, the throne of the king, exploded. Chen's resolute blade whirled and clicked, green blood sprayed onto the wall, steaming and rancid, the grenade was thrown back to the side wall and collapsed, thunder crushed dozens of winged bears, and the claws, hooks, and bones cracked. And the recruits surrounded their throats and stared. Chen personally chopped off the remaining ghosts, and the wall suppressed the beasts. We thought we were in chaos, but God cut off the iron blood and stabilized the family. The side wall was half destroyed, and the mud and rocks rolled into a river of blood, but the monster was stuck and roared with no way forward. Chen's chest was locked with iron and he roared, chop up all the hungry ghosts, and the iron law will be born. Qin Feng's core room's eyes were covered with bloodshot eyes and blood vessels exploded. He grabbed the prototype welding gun with his thin hand and licked the transistor with its flame tongue. The detector clicked and overloaded, and the blue and white pulses skyrocketed and made an ear-splitting buzz. Super Jin. Burn all energy for a week, destroy the beam strike king. The workers knelt around the welding guns and shook their throats. Qin Dangshan burned his life. Our welding dogs thought the lamp was extinguished. God optimized the light river to destroy the beast. The fort lamp pierced the clouds from 350 meters, pulsating like thunder, and erupted with white-hot beams directed at the king of eternal night. The king's carapace sizzles and melts green blood, steaming and scorching the lungs. His red eyes bulge and he roars. He retreats 3 steps and claws dig into the ground. The pit is 5 meters deep. The black tide of the winged sea flaps and recedes. The residents rub their eyes and shout at the brazier, Qin Feng's beam. The king is severely injured. We will tremble in the dark forever. His magic skills light up the shovel night. But the overloaded arc jumps into the spicy air in the room. Qin Feng's waxy face twists and coughs up blood. He is determined in his heart. He ordered to lock the lights and burn his life to protect the fortress. The blood spots on Lin Yuyan's white robe expanded like flowers. Her scalpel clanked and cut into the green veins, which were bruised. She pushed extra shochu and antibiotics into the recruit's arms with the needle of the medicine box to sizzle and scald the meat. The skinny woman's child's arms were covered with green blood wrapped in gauze and her throat was filled with tears. Goddess Lin rescued us. We were blind with hunger and roar, and the king's army gnawed their blood and died together. Suddenly, the team of 5 recruits retreated under cover, and the green mist fountain ripped open their throats with claw hooks. Gritting her teeth, the shovel stabbed down the river of mud and blood. Lin Yuyan rushed forward and pressed her pulse with her heartwarming cry, sacrificial requiem. Iron-blooded retreat. The recruit's throat moved, his legs softened, and he knelt down with blood. Dr. Lin suppressed the green, and the magic hand saved us. Wang Wei lost his team, and he swore allegiance to the shovel. The battlefield was filled with the stench of blood, and there were 300 casualties. The child cried, hungered, and roared to the heart, but her white robe did not fade, and her morale suppressed and burned the iron. After 3 hours of fierce fighting, the claw hooks of the winged sea were clanging and smashing into the force field, and sparks were splashing endlessly. The king's roar rolled back deep into the mountains. The black tide of monsters slowly retreated, and the green blood mud river merged into the nostrils with a putrid smell. The fortress was half destroyed and the wall was cracked with 10 deep pits. The lights pulsed dimly, leaving only 20% of the buzzing sound. Weak, the residents were gasping for breath with their waxy faces beside the brazier. Some people scratched their heads and knelt in the mud and murmured, "Win, win." Injured 300 children and chewed the bark of the tree. The king was severely injured and retreated. We have destroyed the food and only had 3 days left. The family will be devoured forever. Lu Ting knelt down at the iron tower and his spear broke half of his arm and his flesh turned green. Dripping, roaring with iron green, God's hammer, 50 troops died, new recruits gritted their teeth for loyalty. Luo Li's broken leg was dragged back to her shoulder with deep blood marks, and the dagger was bent into black cloth and covered with green coughing mist. The side exploded and sealed, the back road was cut off. Qin Feng's indoor paralyzed welding gun scorched his hand and burst into bloodshot, super destroyed. With 20% of the lamp left, he died in a week. Lin Yuyan wiped away the wounds with a white robe and used the medicine. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her throat was twitching. Sacrifice team, the green vein pressure is 300, and the medicine is burned out. The depression of despair pressed down on her neck, the smell of hunger, sweat, and acid mixed with blood mist stung her lungs, and the fort was swaying like a candle. Chen stood on the top of the remaining wall in a bath of blood. His battle suit was cracked with green blood and dripping mud along the steel blade, and the game in his mind was like a storm. Half destroyed and seriously injured, the king retreated but was not dead. The core was repaired by integrating the blueprint of the ruins. He threw away the steel and melted Kabelko, sparks flew out, the ancient furnace force field chip caulking blue light pierced the air, the lung pulse surged, the core wall expanded 3 times thick and the elastic field buzzed. The king's paw print dent self-healed and blue veins surged like a river of iron. The workers knelt around and shook their throats, beads of sweat fell to the ground, eyes bulged, Yishan melted. The relic's blueprint is a magical skill. We trembled when welding thought the fortress was destroyed, the divine force field reborn the iron wall. Residents rubbed their eyes at the brazier and roared, the thin woman hugged the child knelt down and knelt, God broke with blood to repair the core. We are half-destructed and hopeless, God welds the way to survive and fights the eternal night. Lu Ting Iron Tower climbed up with his spear and shouted blood, lead God Tishin, the team is loyal to the king. Luo Li ghostly raised his dagger. Straight, the rebuke continues, the divine replenishment will make you immortal. Qin Feng's thin hand grabbed the test and clicked, the lamp pulse is stabilized by the force field, and it lasts for 3 days. Lin Yuyan pressed the last needle of warm iron in her white robe, the divine hand rests the soul, the wound is crushed and the iron blood burns. The unity in the fort is like iron, the welding torch is sizzling, the brazier is puffing, reflecting the iron face, the hunger roar turns to a low fighting spirit, but the fat director's dying whisper echoes in Yi Chen's mind, the King of Wings is coming in person, the 3-day mountain range is awakening and the roar is approaching, neither a wing nor a bear, like a heart twitching in an eternal night. Yi Chen stepped on the green blood mud river with his steel boots and splashed away the rotten and pungent smell. He clenched the super crystal core in his fist. The blue pulse was like the humming of the heart beating in the eternal night. The heat wave seeped into the palm of his hand and burned the bones. There was a faint green mist that choked his lungs. His eyes pierced the black shadows of the mountains and he kept roaring, and the hammer in his heart cracked the game, fuse this core, or regenerate the steel fortress, or summon the true form of the king to swallow the fort. Half of the brazier in the fort was swaying, dimmed by 20% lights, and the face was distorted by the wax. The skinny woman held the child by the throat and rolled her legs softly while kneeling in the mud. The child grabbed the bark with its skinny claws, and crumbs fell into the river of blood. The hunger roar turned into a cry and a heart-piercing cry, Yi Chen repairs the core. We ran out of food in 3 days, and the child gnawed the mud to death. The king's remnant party roared, and 7 iron core bullets cannot save the eternal night. Recruit. The shovel fell to the ground with a crisp sound, and the eyes bulged with sweat mixed with urine and dripping mud. The divine welder heals itself 3 times, our welding dog trembles in despair, the crystal core is green mist or the fortress explodes and we die together. The despair rope strangles the neck, the residents are gray-faced and scratch their heads and smash their chests, and someone murmurs in throats, 300 are half damaged, the medicine is exhausted, the green veins are burned, the divine iron sword is used, we kneel to death without a home because of starvation. Lu Ting knelt down on the iron tower, his spear was broken in half, his arms turned green and blood flowed, and the gauze exploded. He roared, his green throat rolled up, and he stared at Wang Shan, the pension team died 50 years ago. The recruits gritted their teeth in loyalty, but their food wheels were cut in half, and their skinny bones gnawed on the trees. We can't shovel the sea of remnants. Luo Li's broken legs were dragged back to the black cloth with green cloth and deep blood marks on her shoulders. The dagger was bent, coughing up mist and choking her lungs. She ghostly raised her eyes to the mountain range, rebuked the remnants of the enemy. The winged bear roared in the black tide, recovered the steel fuel barrel, our legs are broken and we dare not sideways, God repairs the way to survive and continues the investigation. Qin Feng's thin hands melted and burned bloodshot, blood vessels exploded, and his eyes were shattered. Burned out and died in 3 days. The crystal core was overloaded and the prototype was destroyed. Our lamp god knelt down and thought it was destroyed. The god optimized the force field and couldn't support the king's roar. Lin Yuyan's white robe was red and swollen with blood spots. The medicine box was empty. She pushed the last green vein needle with the scalpel. The thin woman's arms were wrapped in gauze and her throat was wet with tears, develop a vaccine. Green injury 300 shochu and antibiotics have been used up, and there is no hope of eradication of the virus. Our magic hand can't suppress the epidemic and the castle is dead. Internal doubts filled the air like poisonous mist. The wax-faced residents beside the brazier turned to shouting, and someone grabbed earth and smashed their chests. Yi Chen chopped off the ghosts in blood to repair the core, and the crystal core king fell into the green mist or summoned his true form. We are half destroyed and hungry and kneeling in darkness forever. The iron lock on Yi Chen's chest sucked blood and the mist became cold. The steel blade buzzed and swung an arc of green blood through the air. He jumped off the top of the remaining wall and the mud and rocks rolled like thunder. The sound was like thunder, exploding the whole fort. Iron-blooded listened to the order. Lord Qin Feng's crystal core blueprint, build a force field self-healing steel permanent net. Luo Li's remnant return take it. Lu Ting cares for the wounded and trains the new ones. Lin Yan's vaccine route is green. Plant the lamps and farmers to purify the water, and the residents will shovel and reinforce themselves, and counterattack the king to destroy the source. After saying this, the new soldier's throat shook, his legs softened and he knelt in the mud, his eyes bulging. The game of God. The crystal core green heat summons the king. We will die, God. I'll fight to the death. But Qin Feng twisted his face, coughed up blood, grabbed the crystal core, and detected arc jumps. The blueprint-caulking ancient furnace suddenly jammed and buzzed, the green mist fountain corroded the steel wall, and the melt marks expanded 3 meters in the spicy air. The guns trembled and screamed. The fusion of Qin Dangshan failed. The green mist corroded the core, 20% of our energy was destroyed, and the gods optimized the fortress and perished together. The residents' braziers went out with a puff, their wax faces turned pale, they grabbed the children and smashed their chests. The depression of despair was as heavy as a landslide, the fusion suppressed defeat, and the family was swallowed up in the eternal night. Qin Feng's bloodshot eyes burst into blood vessels, his thin hands trembled and he gritted his teeth and his heart was determined, lead the leader to melt, and risk his life to protect the fortress. He threw away the recycled steel and melted it into Kobelco, causing sparks to burst out. The ancient furnace force field chip was re-embedded with blue light that stung the air and stung the lungs. The super crystal core fist, the blue light, pressed into the core and buzzed, violently shaking the earth veins. The green mist turned to blue veins like an iron river, self-healing, and the steel expanded 5 times as thick as the claw pits and healed with pulsating thunder. The detector clicked and turned from green to white hot, the permanent energy grid pulsed and pierced the clouds, and the ink tore apart. The light's 350 meters pierced the river of white light within a radius of 10 miles, and the buzzing sound was deafening. The worker's throat rolled softly, his legs softened, and his eyes bulged. Sweat beads fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The master of Qin has successfully fused. The crystal core blue vein divine network, the force field self-healing steel permanent lamp, our welding dog thought it was destroyed, and the magic light up the night of 10 miles. Residents rubbed their eyes while roaring at the brazier, then knelt down, and the thin woman hugged the child and rolled down her throat with tears in the mud. The river of lights extinguishes the darkness. We kneel to death under the pressure of starvation, and the gods merge to survive and swear allegiance to the gods. The test beam shines directly on the mountains, the remnants of the king's winged bears, the black tide, the fan and the dense claw hook hit the force field, sparks splashed and all bounced away, the dents healed instantly, green blood rained down, and the stench was like corpse soup, and the remnants roared and retreated from the mountain with a low cry and disappeared. Luo Li's ghost sprang out, wounded in the leg. Black cloth seeped out and wrapped in new gauze. Her reconnaissance mirror locked the remnants of the enemy. The black tide was surging, recycling fuel barrels, steel, and the shovel was dragging the mud. The winged bear's claw hook scratched the shoulder, the green mist choked his lungs and coughed up blood. The dagger scratched his belly, green blood was rising, explosions and thunder crushed dozens of people. The recruits looked at it from a distance and knelt in the mud with their throats shaking. Luo Guishan detected back. Take it. We are seriously injured and disabled, our legs are weak and we dare not move. The resources are so powerful that we can stay alive. Lu Ting's iron tower arm was wrapped with medicine and held up with a spear to comfort the dead team. He roared at the iron youth training recruits will shovel and screamed, Iron Law grits his teeth. The recruit's magic hammer rotates to support the sky. Turning and shouting with bulging eyes, Lucian Pagoda trains us, we are hungry and roaring to death, and the gods have made an iron-blooded oath to eradicate the remaining party. Lin Yuyen's white robe, blood spots, pressed crystal nuclei, and green veins are used to grind the vaccine, the scalpel cuts the blue slices, the needle pushes the test tube, the blue light melts the virus, and flies away, the green wounds heal instantly without fog, and the recruit's arm is covered with green blood, and the throat moves. Tears mixed in, the forest god researches the root. The vaccine kills the green, we use the medicine to eliminate the epidemic, the god's hand pacifies the soul and invigorates the whole castle. The residents' braziers are rekindled, the iron faces are spontaneously reinforced, the steel is expanded, the farmland is planted with lights to purify the water, the green shoots break through the soil, the water pulses are humming, the smell of hunger and sweat turns to the refreshing fruity fragrance, the internal harmony is like a gushing steel river. The fortress transformed into a steel fortress, the self-healing force field wall pulsed and bounced all the grappling hooks, the permanent energy grid was filled with white-hot lights that burned into the night forever, and the residents turned from waxy faces to iron blood, kneeling and knocking on the brazier and shouting, Yishan Game Crystal Core. The super fort is reborn, we are half destroyed and starving, God breaks the iron order to unite and fight to the death to defeat the king. Chen stood on top of the blood-soaked steel blade dripping mud with his eyes piercing the mountains, formulating a counterattack plan and roared, Luo Li source, in front of Lu Ting, Qin Feng's light beam extinguished the tide, and Dr. Lin crushed all the iron blood out. The remnant party gathered and roared, and counterattacked to dig out the king's roots and destroy the eternal night. Everyone's throats trembled, their eyes bulged, and they roared in loyalty, but the core of the crystal core pulsed suddenly and the blue heat wave pungently buzzed and shook the castle. The green mist faintly lingered and the strange heartbeat was like the king's true body awakening and roaring. The earth veins were shaking. Yi Chen's heart was shaken and the steel fist was clenched, activate the summons, the true body is resurrected and the iron game is reborn. Lu Ting led the recruits to patrol the edge of the fortress with a spear supported by the iron tower. The force field buzzed and scattered wing claws jingled and sparks flew everywhere. The recruits' iron shovel wheels crackled and roared in their throats, the fortress of God is unbreakable. Our team will die under 50 hunger pressure, and the iron law of God's training will endure the eternal night. Luo Li shouldered 7 green crystals to recover. In the nuclear locker, the ghost reported that the remnants of the black tide gathered in Shan, roaring like a thunderous pregnant army. Her legs were shredded and wrapped with vaccines, and her daggers were instantly healed. Her eyes were bulging, the remnant point of the source lock king, thousands of claw hooks are surging, we are dead, God plans to counterattack and wipe out the roots. Qin Feng's handheld detection permanent network is white-hot and steady. The sound of lights reflected on the fort was like daytime water circulation in a fruit field, and the fragrance filled the air. He coughed up blood and turned to laughter, Rongshan. The energy is endless, we are overloaded, and the divine net lights up new life. Lin Yuyan's white robe was unstained, and the final injection of the wound pressure vaccine was completed. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she said in a warm voice, eradicate the green threat, all iron-blooded men are healed, and the God Hand Requiem Castle is in harmony. The residents spontaneously clicked their welding shovels to strengthen the self-healing steel and expand it 10 meters thick. The skinny women and children gnawed the fruit and rolled their throats and knelt down, God cuts off supplies for reconstruction. Food is endless, we kneel down hungry for bark, God's fortress swears to eradicate the king. But in the depths of the mountains, roars turned to violent waves, and the earth cracked. The leader of the remnants of the party, a blood-winged bear king, whose carapace was still melting, red eyes bulging out, spraying poisonous mist, roaring with thick claws and hooks, summoning a black tide, fluttering, blowing, fanning, and burning bones, approaching the edge of the fortress. The force field jingled, sparks splashed, and the dents healed instantly. It throated the wax shell and twisted the heart with despair and regret, the armor melted back the mountain, thinking that the fortress was destroyed, but the divine core melted the super fortress Dingha to destroy the army. The high collision field was full of bullets, and the green blood flowed out, and a putrid smell hit his nose. The leader's red eyes narrowed and he stepped back 3 steps and dug his claws into the pit 5 meters deep, roaring and trembling. The recruits surrounded the wall and screamed, the king's head is broken. The claw hook cannot be broken, they thought they were dead in the counterattack, but the steel of God's fortress is eternal. Chen leaped over the top and the steel blade whirlwind buzzed through the air. The first blade shallowly sliced the leader's carapace and the green mist fountain splashed onto his face in pain. He stabbed coldly, "Destroy the source." The second blade swirled the throat. The head of the explosive blood bubble was rolling and the green blood column was steaming into the sky. The black tide of the remnants roared and the tide receded, and their wings were broken and their bones were broken. The recruits knelt on their knees in the mud and yelled loudly. Chen personally chopped off the king's head. The remnants were defeated and regretted. "We roared, we hungry and desperate, the divine blade and iron blood destroy the eternal night." Residents kowtowed before the brazier and their iron faces twisted into ecstasy. The white-hot lights reflected the evaporating fragrance of the blood river, and the steel heartbeat of the super fortress pulsed like the light of new life. The price of victory is heavy, morale is low and firm as steel, the brazier pops and rekindles the iron face, but a super crystal core fist falls from the foot of the mountain. The blue pulse buzzes faintly, the green blood floats in the pool, emitting strange heat waves and pungent, and the ultimate secret is hidden like the heartbeat of an eternal night waiting to be discovered. Chen's eyes pierced his heart with a huge shock. Is this core melting fort reborn or swallowed? The roar of the mountains continues, and the iron-blooded game begins again. Chen's steel fist hit the core of the crystal core and the buzzing was suppressed. The blue pulse was like a heart trembling. The earth veins crackled and the cracks expanded 3 meters deep. The heat wave was pungent and mixed with the green mist, which was faintly lingering and choking his lungs. His iron eyes were piercing black shadows. Red eyes were piercing the clouds and he was roaring to shake his soul. The white-hot lights in the castle reflected the iron-faced residents, rolling their throats and rubbing their eyes frantically. The joy turned to death, the divine pressure has changed. The victorious iron-blooded rebirth, our hunger has turned to fruity fragrance, and the eternal solid king's roar in the god's fortress has disappeared. But deep in the mountains, violent waves burst, the ground cracked and the mud turned like thunder, the dark field swallowed up the surrounding trees like huge waves of ink, and the bones shattered, and the remaining souls of the remnants of the fusion king's true body were distorted by the black carapace wax. Red eyes bulged out, spraying poisonous mist and roaring to shake the castle. Resurrection. Devour the river of steel lamps. The monster army rolled into the black tide, the winged bear had 1,000 claws, hooks, and 1,000 heads, and the wind burned the bones. The rain of green blood was ready to pour down, and the rotten stench rushed into the nose and approached the edge of the force field. Tinker bells and sparks splashed. The ground crackled, the king's true form has awakened. The ink waves in the domain have wiped out the forest. We thought the ruins collapsed, and the divine pressure moved to summon the army to destroy the fortress. The poisonous fog of despair filled the air again, and the residents next to the brazier grabbed the children with their waxy faces, smashed their chests, and murmured, "The light river is reborn, and the fruit fields are fragrant. We kneel down and pledge our allegiance. God's game will suppress us forever and devour our homes forever." The iron lock on Chen's chest sucked in the fog and became cold, the steel blade buzzed and arced in the air, he leaped to the top to self-heal, the steel pulsated and a thunderous sound exploded throughout the fort, iron-blooded mobilization. Lu Ting leads the vanguard to attack the sealing tide, Luo Li detects the core of the field, Qin Feng's lantern cannon bombards the Black Army, Lin Yi's vaccine is fully pushed. The force field blocks the first wave, I will lead the elite to sneak and destroy the source. After saying that, Qin Feng grabbed the detector with trembling hands and clicked. The pulse surged and turned to a red alarm. He protected his eyes with bloodshot eyes and coughed up blood. He shouted, God's command mobilizes, the energy is endless, the magic cannon is ready to melt the light beam. The worker's throat rolled, his legs softened and he knelt in the mud, his eyes bulging. The Qin Dangshan blasted the Black Army, we trembled and thought the field was swallowed, and the magic skill was white-heated. Source. Lin Yuyan, with her unstained white robe, pushed out the vaccine syringe with a scalpel, her eyes were bright and her voice was warm, and she distributed the green wound prevention agent, Iron Blood Guarantee. The vaccine improves resistance to green mist, and full recovery boosts combat effectiveness. The recruit stabbed his arm with a needle in his throat and shouted in tears, God Lin's hand activates the blood. We can't suppress the epidemic, and the magic potion, Iron Body, will eradicate the real king. Lu Ting, the old scar on the arm of the Iron Tower spear, healed instantly. He roared and Tai Ching led the recruits to pierce the forward with the wheel shovel, God's breaking assault. The team is dead with the iron law of 50 revolutions, and the black tide supports the sky. The recruit's throat rolled and his eyes widened and he roared in loyalty. Luo Li ghostly scurried over his shoulder, carrying the crystal core dagger and bending his eyes to lock the field of ink, broken core. The broken leg healed instantly, the god's faith detects the source. The super fortress force field buzzed and pulsated, and the first wave of black tide was struck by the claw hook of the winged bear. Sparks splashed out and the pit healed instantly. The steel expanded half a meter thick. Green blood flowed and rancid, like corpse soup, pouring and steaming. The lights were white hot. The monster roared and hit the wall. The bones crunched and the debris fell into the mud. The recruits patrolling the wall. The shovel will stung and screamed, force field god blocks. Thousands of heads are raging. Surge, our legs are weak and we kneel down, Chen steel is eternal and is the first wave. Qin Feng's slim face twisted the ancient furnace blueprint and the caulking light cannon was charged with arcs that stung the air. The first shot's white-hot beam shot directly at the edge of the field, buzzing and deafening, melting 100 heads of winged bears. Green mist steamed into the sky, and black smoke filled the air. The recruits looked at the distance and screamed, Qin Shen's bombardment. The melting black army is completely destroyed. We are welding dogs to death, and Shandang River is extinguishing the tide to survive. Lu Ting Iron Tower forward's assault spear whirlwind pierced the leader's wing bear's throat. Gulu's green blood column shot up to the sky. His arm was newly wounded and green blood flowed and was covered with vaccines. Instant pressure and low roar, the leader shoveled the mud and pushed forward, iron law bites, teeth. The divine forward sealed the tide, and the new recruits stabbed the loyal support. But the black tide counterattacked with thick iron hooks and long dense fans that burned the bones. Lu Ting's iron tower was locked by the five-clawed hook, the carapace waxed twisted red eyes, the spear cut off half of his arm, the green mist choked his lungs, and he was seriously injured. He coughed up blood and rolled his throat, seriously injured. The divine assault can't withstand it. Our team will die again, and the divine elite will continue. Luo Li's ghost lurks in the realm. The green mist chokes her lungs and coughs up blood. A dagger slices through her abdomen, a lightning blast crushes 10 winged bears. She moves quickly to lock her heart, her core black crystal pulses and roars, her shoulder has deep blood marks on black cloth and green seeping vaccine. It heals instantly. The dagger stabs straight and cracks. The green mist fountain splashes into her face and hurts. But the realm backfires. Her legs were wrapped in ink and she was dragged into the deep pit. Her figure was missing for a moment. The resident stood beside the brazier, his waxy face turned stiff, and he yelled in despair, Luo Gui is missing. The core is broken. Can't we seal it, will the divine realm collapse? The thrust of the lifting shovel snaps faster and crisper, and the wounded heal instantly, holding the spear and roaring in loyalty, God guarantees the crushing. With the green iron body, we will be destroyed by the epidemic, and God Lin's hand has new fighting power. Yi Chen's eyes pierced the heart of the field, the steel fist clenched, and the elite recruits sneaked into the edge of the ink wave, the steel blade swirled, the wind buzzed through the air, and the first blade cut shallowly into the black armor. The surrounding wing guard Gulu's head was boiling with green blood. He roared coldly, destroy the source. Iron-blooded follow me. The elite throat moved, legs weak and heels roared, eyes bulging, God personally dives. The domain swallows the surrounding area, we are hungry and desperate, the divine blade destroys the true king. The battle was fierce, the ink field devoured the forest trees, cracked bones, and the monsters roared like thunder. The pregnant army pressed forward. Lu Ting was dragged back to the front line after being seriously injured in the Iron Tower. The mud river was green and blood was flowing. The new recruits were will shovels and throat protectors. The Lu Shan Tower is seriously injured. The five-clawed hook exploded. Our forwards can't withstand it, and the elites will continue to be destroyed. Qin Feng the light cannons continuously blasted the river of white-hot light, melting the black tide, thousands of heads, the putrid green mist rushed into the nose and steamed the fragrance of the lights, the detector clicked, all green and stable. He coughed up blood and smiled, the cannon melts the army. The energy is endless, we are overloaded, and the divine network lights up the collapse field. Luo Li was missing for a moment, and a ghost came out of the collar. The domain is deep, the leg is corroded by ink, and the vaccine is covered in ashes. She daggers into pieces. The black crystal buzzes and cracks for 3 meters. The pulsation is severed, the low roar disappears, and the figure is deeply scarred with blood. She carries the fragments on her shoulders and reports, the core is broken. The waves of ink are shaking, we are missing and cannot be suppressed. The divine detective's way of survival is disintegrating. The domain begins to disintegrate and the ink recedes. The debris of the tidal forest crackled and fell into the mud. Black smoke dispersed and white-hot lights pierced the river. The monster army roared and retreated with broken wings and broken bones. The green blood rain poured down. The recruits surrounded the wall and their throats rolled and knelt in the mud and roared, Luo Gui returns and breaks his heart. The realm collapses and the black tide collapses. We die in despair and starve. God mobilizes the iron blood to be reborn. Chen led his elite troops to infiltrate into the core, and the afterimage steel blades swirled with the second blade, slicing deep into the king's true body. The black armor sizzled with molten marks, and the green mist fountain choked his lungs. He locked red eyes with iron eyes and roared, "Summon the source of destruction." The elite iron shovel wheels stabbed the surrounding wing bears with a crisp sound, exploding blood bubbles. Gulu, the iron body of the vaccine and the fog-resistant shovel moved faster, the god himself destroys the source. The real body is fully armored, and our legs are weak and we dare not dive. The living fortress of the divine blade swears allegiance. The king's real body, with red eyes and twisted wax shell, roared, soul shaking, and the black shadow expanded and tried to counterattack, but the leader the domain disintegrated and pulsated, the green veins withered and clicked, the king's armor pit exploded, the pillars of green blood soared into the sky, steaming stinking rot poured down like corpse soup, the black tide of the remaining army collapsed, the mountains collapsed without roar, and the deep veins retreated, the residents. Braziers rekindled, reflecting the iron face, and the shovel spontaneously reinforced and self-healed the steel expansion. The layer was 1 meter thick, and the fragrance of the circulating water in the fruit field filled the air. The child's laughter pierced the eternal darkness. The new recruit Lu Ting was seriously injured and wrapped in a vaccine, and he shouted in an instant, the aftermath of victory. God mobilized to destroy the entire army. Our seriously injured team members are dead and can't suppress it. The unity of God's iron law surges. The fortress transformed into new steel, the lights were white-hot and expanded to a radius of 15 miles, pulsating in thorny clouds. Qin Feng's thin hand detection permanent network was stable, buzzing and coughing blood, then laughing and laughing. The collapse of the field is won by the gods. The lights and cannons melt endlessly, we kneel and tremble to swallow, the divine network lights up hope. Lin Yuyan's white robe swept away the wounds and suppressed them. After the vaccine was fully administered, Lu Ting's arm was instantly healed and his eyes were clear, iron-blooded healing. The resistance to fog increases combat power, and God guarantees the harmony of souls. Luo Li's ghostly shoulder shattered the core, the black crystal locker leg, the black crystal lock leg, the black rotten gray flying dagger straight into the eye, the source is reported. The black tide breaks out in the missing heart, we investigate the death, God's plan is reborn. Lu Ting Iron Tower held up his spear when he was seriously injured, and then roared to lead the recruits to patrol, God's vanguard, hold on. Seriously injured, loyal and gritted teeth, will shovel an iron law to hold up the sky forever. Residents turned to iron-blooded faces and knelt down and knelt on the brazier and shouted, Yishan leads the hidden source of destruction. The army is coming to engulf the territory. We kneel down in despair and hunger. God's destiny mobilizes the ghosts of lamps and cannons. The detectives all came out to eradicate the remnants of the true king. Yi Chen, bathed in blood, stood on top of the steel blade dripping with mud, his eyes piercing the mountains, and made a plan, be fully equipped with iron laws, monitor the pulse and counterattack the deep source. Everyone's throats were shaking, their eyes were bulging, and they were roaring in loyalty. The sense of victory and accomplishment was like the sound of the fruity and refreshing water in the Steel River, and the children were boiling with laughter. But Wang Zhen's red eyes suddenly locked on Yi Chen, the remaining veins of the black shadow appeared, the cloud stabbed the soul and roared, shaking the castle and the ground cracked. The ultimate darkness devoured the ink wave and turned it into a huge mouth, burning bones and approaching the edge of the force field. Sparks splashed, the heat wave pungent green mist swirled around the lungs, the wax shell was reborn, and the heartbeat buzzed. Yi Chen's heart was shocked, the steel fist clenched, the iron eyes were cold and cold, lock the game, finally swallow the iron blood and fight for new hope again. The recruit's throat rolled and his legs softened as he knelt in the mud and screamed, King Suoshen. The ultimate Moku swallow, the aftermath of our victory is thought to be permanent, and the divine blade is truly reborn. The residents' braziers puffed and swayed, their iron faces twisted and roared, the lights pulsed white-hot in preparation for thunder, and the steel heartbeat of the super fortress was like a war drum nurturing the next wave of iron blood. The white-hot lights of the fortress pulsated like a racing heart, reflecting the sallow and twisted residents of the iron-faced people, grabbing children, smashing their chests and throats, and rolling. The urine mixed with the green mist beside the brazier stung their noses and choked their lungs. They knelt in the mud, eyes bulging, eyes squinting, sweat dripping, and screamed, the ultimate ink swallow. The king's red eyes locked on the gods. The river of lights is reborn in the aftermath of our victory. Gods cannot suppress the waves of the eternal night and they perish. Deep in the mountains, the earth cracks and the thunderous waves roll, and the wax shells of the dark realm distort the red eyes and bulge. The poisonous mist roared and shook the soul, the ink wave was 10 feet high and burned bones approaching the edge of the force field. Sparks splashed and the pits instantly expanded and the steel healed itself half a meter. The heat wave was like corpse soup, and the putrid smell rushed into the nose. Yi Chen's iron eyes pierced the clouds, his red-eyed steel fist clenched his chest, and he breathed in the cold fog. He roared and jumped to the top of the fortress to self-heal. The iron buzzed and pulsated, iron-blooded is immortal. Luo Li shattered the core locker, quickly took the super crystal core to fuse with me, and swallowed the source. Luo Li ghostly walked around carrying the black crystal on his shoulders. The deep blood marks on her legs and the flying ash on her legs healed instantly. She straightened her dagger-shaped eyes and protruded from her throat, and a buzzing, pulsating blue light flashed across her eyes, God's command fusion. The core cannot be crushed, we are defeated, and the God's crystal iron body destroys the king. The resident's brazier puffed and swayed, his wax face stiffened, and he shouted in despair, Luo Gui returns with a broken heart. Fusion of divine pressure. We knelt down and trembled, summoning the ultimate ink wave with magical skills. Yi Chen's steel palm connected with the crystal core and clicked, embedded in his chest, and the iron locks pulsed sharply. The blue heat wave rushed through his body like thunder, blasting his bone marrow and choking his lungs. His figure twisted the steel and expanded 1 foot tall, the god of war's carapace. The waxy white-hot pulsating red eyes retreated and dispersed. The iron eyes burst into the river of light. The lights in the castle were all bright for 15 miles, and the piercing clouds buzzed endlessly. The recruits squinted their eyes and rubbed their eyes. Their legs were weak and they knelt in the mud and roared, "God ye transforms. The crystal core melts into the iron body and the god of lights and fire. We are desperate and urinary. The living castle is reborn with a huge mouth." Qin Feng's hands trembled as he grabbed the detector. The red alarm went off, he coughed up blood, and his eyes were shattered. He controlled the ancient furnace blueprint caulked light grid in his inner room at full power, causing arcs to fly through the air and burning his lungs. He roared and distorted his face, "The magic light grid is booming. There is no energy. Burning the source of darkness, we burn our lives and overload ourselves to death. The white heat of the divine river destroys the source." The first wave of light beams poured down like a steel river and hit the edge of the huge mouth, buzzing and deafening, melting ink, thousands of hectares of green mist steaming into the sky, and the residue crackled into black smoke. Wandering around, the claws of the winged bear's leader melted the bones and crunched, and the debris fell into the mud. The recruits looked into the distance and their throats rolled and screamed, "Qin Deng Shen Net. The black tide is burning, our welding dog's legs are weak, and the magic skills light up and come back to devour." But the giant mouth bites back. The wax shell swelled, its red eyes locked on the light source, and roared, spraying poisonous mist that choked the lungs, and the heat wave forced the light pulse to tremble for 3 breaths. The workers knelt on the ground, eyes bulging with sweat, and said, "The source of burning cannot be suppressed. The divine net is shaking, we kneel down and think it is destroyed." God optimizes and continues to blast. Lu Ting's iron tower was seriously injured, his arm was wrapped with a vaccine, and he roared with bloody revenge. He led the new recruits in the vanguard to attack with a wheel shovel, a huge mouth, tentacles as thick as iron pillars, hooks and claws, and a fan that seared the bones, iron law cutting touch. The god transformed into a striker seal, 50 of our team died and couldn't suppress it. God hammer is loyal to the tooth shovel. Spear whirlwind. The first tentacle was pierced, and the pillar of green blood rose to the sky, steaming like corpse soup. His iron tower was twisted by the 3-touch hook, the carapace wax, the red eyes locked his arms, and the green mist exploded. He choked his lungs, coughed up mud, coughed up blood, and rolled his throat. Revenge cannot withstand, the tentacles regenerate, we cut off allegiance, the spirit elite continues. The shovel will squeaked loudly as the tower guard's throat roared, the god of land tower is bathed in blood. We are afraid of the green blood rain when we cut it. Our legs are weak and we dare not, and our divine law and iron body swear to destroy the king. Lin Yuyen's white robe expanded the blood spots, expanded the scalp, pressed the vaccine syringe, pushed out the green wound preventive agent, her eyes were bright and her warm voice distributed the full effect anti-fog boost. The injured warriors instantly healed, their arms rolled over, and they charged together with a low roar, the iron-blooded warriors are all awakened. The vaccine-resistant anti-fog magic agent boosts combat power, and the new recruits can charge faster. The seriously injured recruits had tears rolling down their throats and shouted in support of their spears, God Lin's hand revives blood. We can't suppress the epidemic and are seriously injured, God protects the new Iron Army. Luo Li's ghost lurked with a huge mouth. The green mist choked her lungs and coughed up blood. A dagger slashed her abdomen and exploded with lightning in 10 touches. She quickly channeled her heart, locked energy, and her heart's black veins hummed and roared. The blood marks on her shoulders were deep and covered in black cloth and green seeping vaccine. The vaccine healed instantly. But the heart backfired and the black ink wrapped his legs and dragged the figure into the deep pit. For a moment, the patrolman's wax-faced face stiffened and he shouted, Luo Gui's heart is broken and missing. The energy pulse cannot be suppressed, and we can't seal it. The divine mouth collapses. Luo Li ghostly came out of the pit, his legs were ink and rotten, and the ashes flew away. Broken vein reported back with daggers and bulging eyes, heart exploded. The waves of ink shook and couldn't be suppressed, and the detective's way of survival collapsed. The force field of the fortress was fully opened, buzzing and pulsating, the steel expanded to 2 meters thick, bounced away, tentacles, claw hooks, clanking, sparks splashed out, and the pits instantly healed with white-hot lamps and river thorns. Wearing ink, the monster army roared and retreated, wings were broken, bones were broken, brittle green blood rained down, and the rotten smell steamed. The recruits surrounded the wall, their throats rolled, and they knelt in the mud and roared. The god of the force field swallowed him back. The Luo Gui returned and the heartbreaking army collapsed. We died in despair and starved, and the god was reborn with iron blood. Yi Chen's lantern battle god steel body pulsated and thundered, leaping into the air with iron eyes locked in red eyes and deep in the huge mouth. His steel blade whirled and slashed through the air. The first blade cut deeply into the wax shell, sizzling melt marks and expanding the green mist fountain. The lung-choking heat wave was bone-piercing, and he roared to shock the soul, king of eternal night. Iron. The blood thorn is destroyed. The tentacles around the elite recruit's iron shovel thorn made a crisp sound and blood bubbles exploded. Gulu's throat screamed, the god of war stabs himself. The wax shell cuts the green rain, our legs are weak and we dare not, the god blade master swears allegiance. Wang Hongyan twisted the wax shell and tried to expand. The black shadow that swallowed the steel body pulsated and the ink waves counterattacked, burning the bones and forcing the lights to tremble, but Qin Feng's lamp net blasted the river of white-hot light, burning the source of the green mist. The rancid smell filled the nose and steamed the fragrance of the lights. Lu Ting's iron tower took revenge, cut off the tentacles and regenerated, shoveled the mud and pushed forward, bathing in blood and roaring. The broken glass dagger cut off the pulse of the heart. Lin Yuyan's vaccine iron army gathered and charged, the fog-resistant shovel stabbed faster and louder than thunder, the king's real body roared and disappeared, and the black armor pit self-destructed. Green blood pillars shot up to the sky like corpse soup, and the black tide of the remnant army collapsed and the mountains collapsed without roar. The deep veins retreated. The second spin of Yi Chen's steel blade stabbed deep into the core, buzzing and splitting 5 meters away. The pulse was cut off. His lantern and war god armor erupted with eternal light, stabbing the clouds and tearing apart the eternal night ink curtain. The first golden ray of dawn fell on the earth, dazzling warmth, melting ice and snow, the fruit field water cycle, the fragrance bursting, children's laughter boiling, the sound of cool water, the steel of the fortress. The heart beats like a war drum and expands to an endless river of white-hot lamps in a radius of 30 miles. The residence braziers are rekindled and the iron faces are spontaneously shoveled to reinforce the self-healing steel 3 meters thick. The recruits are soothed and wrapped with vaccines and instantly suppressed and roared, the divine burst of dawn. King Yun's core is stabbed. We are seriously injured and can't suppress it. The unity of the divine iron law surges and is reborn. Qin Feng's thin hand detects the stability of the permanent network. He coughs up blood and then laughs with his throat, eternal river of light. The light network is endless, we kneel and tremble to swallow it, God lights up the dawn. Lin Yuyan's white robe swept away the wound and pressure vaccine and healed her eyes brightly, iron-blooded requiem. Withstand fog and eternal fighting power, God guarantees to embrace new life. Luo Li's ghost turned back, shattered his veins, locked his legs, and daggers flew straight into his eyes. The source of death is reported. The heart of the explosion is falling, the black tide is flying, we are dead, God's plan is complete. Lu Ting's iron tower was seriously injured and he led the recruits to patrol, God's vanguard is forever. Bloody loyalty to shovel touch, iron law supports the dawn of the sky. Everyone's throats moved, their eyes bulged, they knelt and kowtowed and roared in loyalty. The aftermath of victory was like a river of steel. The fruity fragrance filled the air. Children chased the light and laughed. The blueprint for technological renaissance. Ancient furnaces simmered with electric arcs. Supplies were abundant. Shovels were recycled. The human beacon shines through the darkness. The residents' waxy faces turned to iron-blooded roars to respond to the crispy and juicy fruits beside the brazier. The children's laughter pierced the lingering fog, and the recruits were pierced with vaccines to resist the fog and permanently stab the shovel on the border. Detective Luo Li continued to explore the ruins. Qin Feng optimized energy. Lin Yuyan's medical care was harmonious. Lu Ting's iron law pioneers. Everyone embraced with blood and tears and laughter rolled down their throats, Yishan Thorn King. The dawn shines on the fortress, and we are hungry. We kneel in despair, and God leads the lights to rebuild our homes forever. The iron blood is boiling with victory, the remnants of the party collapsed and the mountains collapsed without a roar. The harmonious fruity fragrance in the castle pierced the eternal darkness, but the blue core of the crystal core exploded with a heat wave. The earth veins crackled 3 meters, and the shadow of the hidden king's true body appeared. Red eyes pierced the clouds and roared to shake the soul. Resurrection summons, the ultimate devouring game begins. Yi Chen's steel fist smashed into the core with a suppressed buzz, and his eyes pierced the wild waves in his heart. The iron law is fully prepared, and the true king of counterattack has new hope. But at the edge of the dawn, the deep veins of the clouds are faintly flashing with red light and growling. Yi Chen's iron eyes are cold and his steel fists are clenched, and his heart is shaking slightly. The game of rebirth, the remnants are deeply rooted in the iron-blooded surveillance, and hope for another fight. The lights of the fortress are white-hot and pulsating, the war drums are endless, the children are laughing in the fruity fragrance and the cool water is ringing, and the steel heartbeat of mankind is burning forever, illuminating the endless road ahead.